right. Thank you for joining us, everyone. It is 11 a.m. my time. I'm on the West Coast, so I feel like saying good morning again to everyone, but I realize that a lot of people it's probably not morning for. I am Billy Bob. I have this Facebook page, and then I have a YouTube that we're streaming to. So we're streaming to my Facebook, we're streaming to my YouTube. I'm in a few debate groups on Facebook, capitalism, communism kind of things. And I'm always trying to entice people that disagree with me to have a discussion, to come on a live stream and, just discuss the issues. And I've gotten kind of unsatisfied after 15 years of, text debating. And I'm really interested in, participating in more of these face-to-face discussions. I really want to get better. I want to, get more familiar with it, and I want to get better at, addressing people's objections and trying to be sensible about responding to critics of my worldview, etc. So I've talked to David. He is in one of my groups, and he's had the same experience. He said he does not. It is not easy for him to entice people like me to have discussions, and he's always trying to get people to talk to him, on a live stream, and nobody ever will. And so we're in the same boat. But David, do you want to introduce yourself, say a few things about yourself, or we can get straight into it?
Sure. I'm David. I'm a giant troll, on the internet. Well, not a giant. I try to be a giant troll on the internet. I just like to poke people, make them upset, respond to me, and see how stupid they are compared to, me. And I just like to have fun, and I'm really interested to find out, the positives of communism after, what the world's gone through, and just I'm really curious to know what your perspective is, and you probably know mine, but I'll go over that if you
want. Okay, so yeah, and we were kind of discussing this backstage. You're kind of just interested in hearing me, try and give a defense for my worldview and explain it, because from your perspective, it's like, communism has been an absolute horror show every time it's, appeared on the planet.
right.
And so it's like, who is the idiot that thinks that this is good and we should do it again?
Right. Even like the modern day example of China having to embrace state capitalism in order to, function and grow. I'm curious to see how you marry that too. So go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I try and, do all the time, is, provide an explanation, a coherent explanation of, what the ideology of communism is and what it isn't, because I think there's just a lot of misconceptions, misperceptions. And so my thinking, my honest thinking, is that what you think is true, right, historically and ideologically, right? So you have some thoughts about what the ideology of communism is, and you have some thoughts about what the actual lived history is of communist societies. And so the problem is, like, we just have two fundamentally different conceptions of both of those things. And so if we don't acknowledge that, if we don't understand that, we can talk past each other, or we can just get in this, I tell you something from my perspective and you tell me something from your perspective. And we're never really getting past these different worldviews. But that's the most fundamental thing. And I don't mind explaining, my perception, but, my understanding of history is again, diametrically opposed probably to your understanding of history. And then what you think the ideology of communism is about, what it says is true. Like, I think also we would just disagree with. So is that fair? Can we agree on everything I've said so far?
Oh yeah, definitely. We also have different ideals too. You probably idealize equality, equity for individuals. Like you said, you're a very well off individual in California, and you wish everybody could have what you have. And from my perspective, I see, I believe evolution is real, and I think there's a reason why you have what you have, and why some people don't have what they don't have, and we just fundamentally disagree on how things should be. But other than that, I'm curious to know what your argument is for your side, and I'm willing to provide you an argument for my side.
Yeah. No. Okay. So yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're kind of, I mean, you're implying that there is a meritocracy of sorts where people's ultimate station in life results from what they deserve, kind of.
Right.
And
Evolution is real.
okay, that's interesting. That's an interesting because I mean, there are such things as accidents and injuries that, like, in this society, you can lose your home, you can become homeless due to an injury that wasn't even your fault because you can't pay your medical bills. So I mean, there's I don't know, I would push back on the idea of meritocracy, but let's if you want, we can talk historically. Okay, so my historic understanding, and this is kind of my understanding of there's a certain communism says something about reality. Communism suggests that reality is this way, and because reality is this way, this is what we should do. So it's some assertions, right? It's some assertions of what is real and what is true. Now, if you don't believe those assertions, you're not gonna agree with what is true. But my argument would be that yes, communism is correct about reality and how reality exists, and then how do we address that reality. I think communism again has the correct prescription. And so let's start with what the truth claims are, right? And so communism kind of says that as a species we're progressing through history. And we can start in prehistoric times, or we can just skip to feudalism. And so for the sake of brevity, let's skip to feudalism. So you had a ruling class in the feudal system where kings and the church comprised the ruling class. So you had hereditary monarchy in alliance with the church, and that was the ruling class. And then you had like nation states and fiefdoms. And you had wars back and forth, and peasants were the vast majority of people, but they really didn't have any power. And so what you had was a capitalist revolution. You had a capitalist revolution in the United States, in Britain, in Holland, and you overthrew the feudal monarchy. You overthrew the hereditary monarchy, and you created what we know as the capitalist system, where essentially the ruling class was expanded. And so instead of just a hereditary monarchy in allegiance with the church, you also had, the government really expanded, and it actually incorporated the wealthy industrialists, the elites, the bankers. And so we kind of saw a progression from feudalism to oligarchy. And it came with a lot of benefits, right? It came with tons of benefits. And, humanity has improved with the capitalist advance against feudalism. That's good. It's good for humanity, and it caused the Industrial Revolution, and it caused life expectancies to skyrocket. Ease of life. Life became easier. But the communists argue that there's still room for improvement. So expanding from hereditary monarchy to oligarchy was good. But there's still the work that we can do. And so instead of oligarchy, we kind of think that we ought to have a government that doesn't just represent the wealthy elites, right? We should have a government that represents the working class majority, and that's really what democracy is, right? A government that represents the people instead of the minority ownership class. So I mean, and so I said class, and class is a very important component of socialism, communism, Marxism. And I'm going to use those terms interchangeably. I know some people are going to not like that, but for me, it's, socialism, communism, Marxism. I can explain how I think those words are different, but for our purposes here, I can use those words interchangeably. We see society, capitalist society, is divided between the ownership class and the working class. And so class, according to Marxism, is determined by how one relates to the means of production. So the means of production are those things that are necessary for society to function. Industries, banks, media, all those things that are necessary for society to exist. People relate to those things in certain ways. And so if you are an owner of one of those things, you have certain political and economic interests, and those political and economic interests are probably often going to be in opposition to the political and economic interests of people who relate to the means of production as workers, as having to sell their labor to the ownership class in order to survive. So this is the class, the reality of oppositional class interests that is a fundamental reality of the capitalist system. And so if you don't understand, the reality of class and oppositional class interests, of course, you're not really going to understand anything that I'm going to be saying. But so that's, one of the most fundamental aspects of communist ideology is understanding that there's a class conflict, understanding that there's a struggle to control the state. There's a struggle to control the levers of power. There's a struggle to control policy. Part of that struggle, there's an ideological struggle. So there's an effort to, on the part of the ownership class to win hearts and minds over to their side, right? To try and propagandize, I would argue, propagandize and influence and manipulate people into supporting their oligarchy. And so, so we do not, unify as a working class and come together against their oligarchy and demand accountability, demand improvement, and, demand really a government that represents the working class majority. So they don't want that to happen. This is the class struggle. Part of that class struggle is information warfare. And of course, they're really good at, because they are the owners of society, because they're the wealthy ownership class, because they have all the resources, all the capital, right? They own all the media. Okay, I've gone too far. Tell me, where did I lose you?
They don't own all the capital. Everyone has capital. Everyone has human capital. That's how you get capital. Capital is your human capital. You build your human capital, and then you trade your labor for compensation, and or you build your human capital to the point where you satisfy the needs and wants of many people, and you acquire a lot of money, and that way you would attain traditional capital. These communists and socialists like to pretend like people don't have human capital. They're not individuals. They don't build upon themselves over time. That everyone is equal, and people are not equal. People are different from one another. Some of us are smarter than others. Some of us are better looking than others. Some of us are just more capable of achieving things that others can't. And communists and socialists try to wash that away and make everyone equal. And that's just not reality. Reality is evolution is real. And there's a reason why poor people are poor. There's a reason why you're in California in the upper 10% of the income earners or wealth holders. There's a reason why things are the way they are, and communists try to fight reality, try to fight evolution, try to fight progress. And so what say you?
Well, I mean, that's interesting. So I remember, my opening argument was that you think things are true about communist ideology that I don't think are true. So I think what you just said about communists denying that people are different, denying that people are more intelligent, wanting to make people equal to one another. I mean, I know Marx and Engels spoke directly against that, and they called that the lies of bourgeois academics. Like that's not socialism. That's not communism. What you just described isn't Marxism. So it's, you're attacking a straw man, which has nothing to do with anything that I ever thought or said. And this is, I mean, we encounter this a lot. and this is the thing. We got to keep in mind that, I need you. I need you to respond to the arguments I'm making, because my argument is that you don't understand what I believe, right? And so, and you kind of, to me, you're proving my point, because you disregarded everything I just said, and you started, railing against this straw man that you have in your mind. But that's it's going to be tough for us to navigate this discussion if we do that. So no, I want to ask you. So you mentioned progress. So I would agree with you. I would agree. If I was trying to make everybody equal, I can agree with you that would be holding back progress. That would be a stupid thing to do, and let's not do that. And who's the fucking idiot that wants to do that? Because that's dumb. But look, what I'm telling you is Marx and Engels, like I can pull up that essay that Marx and Engels spoke directly to that, just like I'm speaking to that now. Like, this is an invention. This is an invention of bourgeois academics ascribing to us beliefs that we don't have.
Okay, no, so what do you want then? What's the goal of communism?
Well, okay, what Marx and Engels said, I think it was Engels, actually. It was Engels, and it was called On Equality. And he's saying what we want is, what we're striving for is an abolition of class. We don't want owners of industry. We want the industries to be held in common. And of course, that simply can't happen, in a capitalist world dominated by capitalist powers and private wealth. And that's the world we live in. And so you see, China pursuing a hybrid economy where, the industrial, the heights of the economy, the biggest industries, steel industry, are owned by the party. But then you have a lot of private industries, and you got a lot of cutthroat competition, and the people are benefiting from that competition, and humanity is benefiting from that competition. So we're not at the material conditions don't exist right now where we can just abolish ownership, private ownership, and abolish class, right? Like, we're not there where we can just buy fiat. No, this is something that we have to work towards. And it's aspirational, and nobody is calling for the immediate. I mean, okay, a lot of people that call themselves communists probably are, but I'm again, my argument is that, a lot of Western communists don't know what they're talking about. And so what I'm saying, is the communism of Stalin, the communism of Mao, and the communism of Xi in China. But so, I mean, let me just, what do you see as progress? Because I would agree with you that if I was trying to ignore people's differences and just wanting everybody to be of equal intelligence and equal, industrialistness, that would be a fool's errand. And so.
But you want to get rid of classes, right?
So the ultimate resolution to the problems inherent with capitalism, right? So capitalism, we can look around the planet and we can see that it's not a perfect system, that there's room for improvement. Part of that room for improvement is, Todd's saying I should mute you when you're not talking because there's a little bit of feedback. But I don't want to. It's a challenge. So aspirationally, ideally, we can see a classless system is going to do away with the problems inherent with class struggle, right? And so really the problems that I see that are manifest today are things like oligarchy, things like imperialism, exploitation. Like, these are all symptoms associated with oppositional class interests.
It sounds like you want equality for everybody with no classes. I mean, I don't really see how you. What's the difference there? I mean, you don't want. You're not saying you want. You say you don't. You're not asking for everybody to be equal, but then you want a classless society where everybody would be equal.
Well, yeah, but what is class? I mean, class means the abolition. Well, class refers to one's relationship to the means of production. So if all of the means of production are owned collectively, it doesn't mean that. What's that?
Equally.
Okay, well, but that talks about ownership. That's not about people's faculties. That's not about people's intellectual faculties. Like, I mean, you're still going to have planners. You're still going to have, hopefully the smartest. For instance, the Communist Party in China, right? It's like it's not easy to get into the party. It's like they're very selective. The current, leader of China, he was denied 6 times access to the party. So it's definitely a meritocracy. And so, the idea that socialism eschews merit, that's just not, that's not a tenet of Marxism, socialism, or it's a fundamental misperception. It's a misconception of what it is. But how about just addressing? I said a lot, and then your first response was, you want to make everyone equal, and I mean, I guess the answer to that is nuanced, because we do want to abolish class ultimately. Nobody's trying to abolish class immediately. Again, we can look at China and see their pragmatic approach to dealing with class issues in a capitalist world. And that's going to have an evolution, but right now, to attack me for demanding the immediate abolition of class, that's not a fair criticism. What I'm saying, and what I wanted you to respond to, is I'm saying, hey, let's not have a government that represents the wealthy elite minority. Let's have a government that's representative of the working class majority. And so I noticed that you didn't really respond to that, but I'd like you to.
You don't want a government that is ruled by the people who have provided the most value to society. You want people who don't provide value to society to rule the government. Is that right?
Well, okay. So, like
because money is given to people when they provide value to others, so I just what's the justification of allowing people who aren't contributing as much to the tribe? What's the justification of giving to them what they haven't earned? Again, evolution is real.
So it sounds like you're asking me to argue how democracy is superior to oligarchy. Maybe.
Well, I mean, that's involved with getting what you want, right?
And I kind of expected it's a given, right? I kind of expected that most people are going to understand that a government that represents the working class majority is going to be preferable, for at least workers, more preferable from the perspective of the working class, than an oligarchy. Obviously, the oligarchs want to maintain their oligarchy, and they want to, keep democracy from occurring. They want to keep the working class. What?
Not entirely, at least in this country. Everyone has a vote. What do you think is going on in the United States right now? We have a vote. We elect representatives. We elect senators. We elected the president. The president got the popular vote. The representatives made the laws. But where's the problem here?
Well,
are people just too dumb and brainwashed by the money in politics, or what's going on?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So I spoke to this, in my opening remarks, and I was explaining how the class struggle kind of has, intrinsic to it, this informational warfare, right? And so the oligarchy, having interests that are opposite the working class majority, has to create a propaganda apparatus. They have to create a system that, does detach people's minds from this reality of oppositional class interests and class struggle, because it is in their interest to do so. Because right now they're winning the class struggle. In the West, they've won the class struggle. They have total control over the media, over the government, over the economic policies, over the foreign policies. And you can vote however you want, and you can vote for whoever you want, and none of that is going to change. Because if voting affected their system, they would outlaw voting. But they're more than happy. They've created this voting spectacle that allows people to engage in this, formal, exercise of, I want, oligarch puppet A. I want the blue oligarch puppet instead of the red oligarch puppet. But again, we saw, like with Barack Obama, he offered hope and change. It was all the same. And then even Trump himself, right? He ran on a platform of, I am anti-establishment. This establishment sucks. I'm going to drain the swamp. And people knew that. People hate the establishment. They understand it's an oligarchy. And so he was overwhelmingly popular and got elected. But guess what? He was selling us what we wanted to hear, and he's just doing more of the same. So this has just repeated throughout my lifetime over and over again. We've seen, they try and figure out what the people want, and then they tell it to them. But then when they get in power, they just serve the same exact interests. And so, ultimately, that's what an oligarchy is. And even if it has this pretense at democracy, I mean, that's all it is. And there's been studies, there's that Princeton University study that kind of on an empirical basis demonstrated that, it doesn't matter what people want. What matters is what the oligarchs want. And that's the policies that the government pursues. So, I'm just saying we can improve on that system, and improvement is by, actually representing having government that represents the interests of the working class. Part of that system is also going to end the constant indoctrination and the constant brainwashing of the American populace into, this oligarchic two-party sham democracy, where everybody is either given liberal, nonsense, liberal narratives, or conservative nonsense, conservative narratives, and then they're corralled into this duopoly, and they don't understand. They think winning is when this oligarch faction gets elected instead of this oligarch faction. But guess what? Actual winning is when both of these oligarch factions kick rocks and we get a government that represents us. That's what real politics is, and that's what they try to keep the American people from understanding. They try and get people to buy in to their fake democracy, and then if people fall for that, they're not understanding reality, and their mind is detached from reality, and then they're not a threat. They're not a threat to the oligarchy, and that's so that's what that's why I'm a socialist, because I am describing reality, and it's only socialism that has been describing this reality for since Marx, right? This is the reality described by Marx. This is how capitalism works. Capitalism ends up being an oligarchy and opposing democracy, and then using all of the the private wealth and private ownership of the means of production to maintain and perpetuate a system that works disproportionately on behalf of the owners and against the interests of the vast majority of it. And we see that in our foreign policy. We see that in all kinds of policies, our domestic policies, our foreign policies.
How are the people not being represented right now? What's missing from our system that they're not? What's not being done by the government that you want to see done? How are the people missing out? How's the oligarchy oppressing everyone or keeping them from achieving what the goal is?
Well, I mean, so for me, foreign policy is the main issue. I mean, of course, we could talk about domestic policy, and I could give you a long list of things. But, I don't think the American people need or want 1,000 foreign military bases. We don't need or want perpetual war for the past 300 years. We don't need or want antagonism against China and a future war with China. We don't need or want a possible nuclear war or a global economic collapse because we want to overthrow the government in Iran, right? So these are imperial policies that are being pushed on to people, and some of them embrace them, right? There's a lot of working class people. I wouldn't say a majority by any means, but there's a lot of working class people that internalize these narratives that are constantly being shoved down our throat about how we have to save the Iranian people, about how we have to save the Cuban people, the Venezuelan people, the Vietnamese people, the North Korean people. I mean, and it's just, if the American people, if you do a poll right now, aren't in favor of these policies, even though we are cradle to grave indoctrinated into supporting these policies. Even with all of that brainwashing that takes place, the American people are still opposed to imperialism. And so, and why is there imperialism? Well, it's because that's what the owners want, because it's good for them, but it's not good for the working class.
I disagree. People want a better life. People want things to be easier and cheaper and better, and the government is providing that. For the last 40 years, we've had an increasing standard of living despite stagnant wages. So, I mean,
can I ask you a direct question? So let me ask you, people want a better life. They want a better standard of living. Do they want that at the expense of other people, or would they prefer to have that and share it with other people? Or do they want it at the expense?
I think they tell themselves they want to share it, but I think when it comes down to it, it really doesn't matter to them. They would take, getting more themselves than sharing with others.
And you would probably chalk that up to human nature, whereas I would chalk that up to a cradle to grave capitalist indoctrination, telling people not to give a fuck about other people. And I think without that constant indoctrination, you're going to have a lot fewer pieces of shit who think like that. You know what I'm saying? I think people become pieces of shit because of their environment. And I think if we had a different kind of environment, there would be a lot fewer pieces of shit. And whereas
people are human. Humans are animals. And as I've said a few times now, evolution is real. People want to be on top. People want the best. People want to be above other people. That's just human nature. And so there's always going to be classes. You're always going to have rich people and poor people. And if you keep the poor people around by, giving them money and helping them out, you're just going to have your violent communist revolutions where, people die in the streets and then eventually starve to death because, markets need signals and communism doesn't like markets. So, yeah.
So there's the natural inevitability of things, and communism and socialism works against those natural things. Right. No, and that's what I kind of predicted, your argument to be. And again, I would just say that, the degree to which that is true is also affected by the environment. And I think if we created a different environment, we could get a lot more decency from people than we currently have in a different environment. And I think part of the problem of lack of decency and people behaving like pieces of shit is the fact of scarce resources and the fact of capitalism itself, where your ability to accumulate resources is directly tied to your ability to accumulate capital. And so I think maybe we could have like a situation where we make it a priority that everybody is entitled to the basics, right? And then obviously if you're smarter, if you work harder, you can move from there. But I think there's so many things that could be improved in our society. I mean, and where to begin, right? I mean, the homelessness, the lack of happiness, the lack of mental health. I think these are directly related to the environment that has been created by the ownership class, because they don't want people to think in terms of the societal good, right? That's dangerous to them. They don't want people to start thinking about what's good for society. They want people to think on an individual basis how, they want people to imagine themselves as if they are, temporarily embarrassed billionaires, and that, think like a billionaire. Like, do you want the government to tell you what to do with your money? So it inculcates this selfishness, this really self-destructive selfishness, which has a lot of negative externalities. Don't even get me started on the number of people that need psych meds just to make it through the day. There's just it's unconscionable. The way that the ownership class has just hollowed out this society and really stripped people of their humanity. And I think when people look back and appreciate that, like they're going to be appalled. I think it's like the water that we swim in. We don't even realize it. We just accept it. But I think, if you look closely and scrutinize things, like it's really bad. And again, talking about mass shootings, active shooters, and like it's just unprecedented. Like what is going on with humanity and society? And so again, the point is that there's room for improvement. And so how, you're kind of championing this system like it's inevitable and there's no room for improvement. And it seems to me that there's just tremendous room for improvement. And so I don't know, like how can you make the case that this is as good as we can do?
It's not as good as we can do. We can do better. It's just we need to allow people to do better if they can do better, and accept what we can't change, and accept that some people can't do better and they're not deserving of more than what they're getting.
So, I mean, somebody who loses their home because they were in a car accident, not their fault. Like, and I mean, in this country, it's like medical bills.
It really sucked when the meteor came and killed all the dinosaurs, but shit happens, man. You just have to accept what you can't control and change what you can.
Okay, but here's the thing, David. So in every other industrialized country, it would probably bring down a government if one person had to declare bankruptcy because of a medical bill. So to me, that is absolutely something that we could account for in this country, right? We don't need most bankruptcies resulting from medical issues. Like that is something that we can account for, but why don't we do it? And again, you can't understand why we don't do that unless you understand how the class struggle plays a role in this dynamic.
Struggle to be on top, or the struggle? What is the class struggle?
Okay, so again, so the ownership class can afford the best doctors and the best medical care that money can buy, right?
And why are they the ownership class? What made them the ownership class?
I mean, that's a tangent. I mean, it's going to totally sidestep us from the point we were talking about. But I mean, if you want to go down,
someone who was related to them they provided value to society. They got the money voluntarily through exchanges of value. The ownership class are people who are providing value to society. You're advocating for the survival and the perpetuation of poverty, subsidized by the ownership class and given political power to do whatever the people whom evolution is selecting for elimination. You're basically advocating for the end of the world, because you're trying to go against what's natural, what's happening through nature and through just things falling as they will. If you try to go against the grain, if you try to improve where you're weak and let where you're strong subsidize your weakness, you're not going to get anywhere. You want to go with what you're best at. You want to specialize with what you're best at. And when people are allowed to specialize with what they're best at, they improve not only themselves, but they improve society. Society moves forward when people are allowed and free to do what they're best at, make their own money, and their money can go out into society and maybe help others up, or maybe give people opportunities to improve themselves. Bill Gates is a billionaire. He's throwing billions of dollars into Africa. That shithole's not going to improve anytime soon, but he's dumping all of his money in Africa, and it's not going to fix anything, because the reason why Africa hasn't succeeded is because of the lack of human capital, not the lack of capital.
No, I appreciate you articulating your perspective and your understanding. And I mean, what you were saying was, it's the wealthy are wealthy for a reason. They have earned their wealth, and for us,
and then they're wasting their money. But I mean, a common argument against like generational wealth is that the rich kids didn't deserve their money, but they'll lose the money if they don't deserve it. money doesn't stay in stupid hands. Money goes away from stupid people, from bad ideas. That's how capitalism works. Unless you're providing value to society, you lose your money.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. I mean, I know there's people on the right that have different perspectives, right? Because some will agree with me that these people aren't really providing society; they're just controlling the government. And then, but those people from the right will say, "Well, that's not capitalism; that's corporatism." They won't defend the system as capitalist. They will say that's not real capitalism; that's corporatism. Whereas you are saying you're kind of defending the system as capitalism, and it's an interesting conversation. And it's interesting to hear and understand and think about all the different approaches and perspectives there are to explaining what the very same reality, because you with your two eyes and your brain are seeing basically the same reality that I'm seeing. You're looking out the window, seeing the same country, you're watching the same news, you're in the same society, but we just we're what we draw from our observations are just radically different interpretations. But even people on the right, they also have a different perspectives on what's going on. So it's interesting that you're defending the existing system as capitalism, and the existing, and your argument is we don't want to put constraints or pass laws. The unruly mob should not be trying to constrain and take away the wealth from these people who have legitimately earned it and who are know better what to do with their own money than we could ever tell them to do with it. So I mean, I get that. I think that the biggest argument against that is the reality of what they're doing with their wealth is trying to destroy democracy. They're trying to destroy representative government. They're making sure that the government furthers their interests, right? And so I think that's one of the ways. And this is why I think that those people kind of have a point that call what we have as corporatism and not capitalism. Because they're saying, in capitalism, the government isn't going to be able to be bought. I don't know how that's going to happen, but that's what they say. So, and I think that's the biggest problem with these mass accumulations of wealth, because with this mass accumulation of wealth, they are buying the media, which allows them to propagandize and buy people's opinions, influence people's opinions, detach their minds from reality, and also, get policies in place that allow them to perpetuate their wealth. And so, it's not like we have a market competition where if you're not providing a service, you're going to lose your money. You don't have to provide a service. You just have to reinvest in your stock, and your stock multiplies, and it's a perpetuating casino kind of game. So, I mean, there's a lot of legitimate criticisms about, allowing people to accumulate so much wealth. Have you ever do you appreciate the extent to which wealth inequality exists? Because I have a real quick illustration of just the extreme nature of wealth inequality that I think most people don't really appreciate. I don't think most people really appreciate how obscenely wealthy, being worth $1 trillion is.
I understand it. I don't see how it's relevant. I don't care how much money is in someone else's bank account. I don't know. I don't understand why you guys fixate on that. Who cares if other people have tons of money? You think it gives them power? That's not where power comes from. Okay. That's influence. Influence is what that is, and influence doesn't necessarily mean power. You can't buy an elected office. You can have a bunch of advertising, you can have a bunch of ads, but that doesn't buy you anything. People waste tons of money every election cycle trying to get elected, and they have bad ideas, and they have stupid policies that they're presenting, and the electorate rejects them. If you're not providing value to people, you're not going to get what you want. And unfortunately for communists and socialists, people don't want it in the United States, and that's why you don't have the power, and you don't have the elected officials, and you're probably never going to, unless the replacement happens and you have a bunch of voters who are as dumb as apparently you think they are.
Okay. Okay. I wanted to mention the comments. I appreciate the viewers. I appreciate all the comments. I am struggling to keep up with the comments, and so I've just kind of tuned out the comments. So I'm going to go back and read them. But I appreciate everybody weighing in and having thoughts. And at some point we'll go over I'll go over the comments. But yeah, right now it's like I did do my podcast before this one, and it's all I can do to focus on what David is saying and try and think of some sensible responses. So I'm just kind of ignoring the comments. Sorry about that. So yeah, and then there's the feedback issue. I just don't have the wherewithal to mute David when he's not talking. That's too much work too. So there's a little bit of feedback, and I apologize for that. So you know, I was just going to say, I mean, you know, I think what I like about China is that I think China, you know, demonstrates a real life example of communism, right? And so if you look at China, there's a lot of good things that you can say about communism. So, and I want to list a few of them. China was probably the poorest country in 1949. And now I think by many metrics, they're the richest. It's been less than 100 years.
How'd they do that?
Okay, well, look, I would love to answer that question. I want to, but let me just finish talking about what they've accomplished. As far as you know, home ownership, they have one of the highest home ownership rates. They have had a tripling of wages every 10 years for the past 40 years. So wages in China have tripled. Okay, and that has tripled every 10 years for 40 years in a row. That has led to 800 million people being lifted out of poverty, as the World Bank defines it, which is like $2.50 a day or something. So they have 0% poverty, whereas in India, it's still like 60%. Nigeria, it's still like 60%. So what China was able to do, what the Communist Party of China was able to do is fantastic. Not only that, they have world-class education system, and they also have like a very low crime rate. It's like, you know, crime in China is hardly an issue, especially compared to the United States. So then you look at, you know, happiness indexes. I know the Washington Times recently published a poll that said, you know, China is the happiest place on earth. China has a tourist boom where, you know, they are causing a tourism boom in so many countries with Chinese tourists because they now can afford to travel. And guess what? They travel and they come back home because they're like, hey, we have something really good going on here. So this has all been because of a communist party that took power in 1949. And I think that's an example of what we could aspire to. There's a lot of things we can see that China is doing that's successful, and that we could look at that and reflect on what we're doing here and maybe improve some of the things here. But I mean, if you compare crime rates, compare incarceration rates, compare rates of psych med addiction, or, you know, well, that's two different things. You know, narcotics addiction and then psych med dependence, you know, so mental health issues. It's like China really has a lot going for it. And so that's an example of a thriving, successful socialist country. Now, how did they do it? I can tell you how you think they did it, and then I can tell you how I think they did it. So you think that, you know, when Mao died, that Deng took over and did capitalist reforms and turned China capitalist. And so ever since they've been capitalist, they're doing good.
State capitalism, but yeah, go ahead.
So, and that's typical. You know, a lot of people are, you know, want to credit capitalism, and they're saying that the only reason China started doing good was because they turned their back on socialism. They reformed from socialism, and they became capitalism. And I think this is very important. What I'm going to say here is really important, and people need to understand this, because it's the rational, logical explanation for what happened, and it gets to the heart of the ideological confusion among people who think they oppose socialism, right? You think you oppose socialism because you think socialism is a dogma, right, that is predicated on taking political power and then trying to make everyone equal, or trying to immediately abolish private ownership. And so what I would say is that communism, socialism, Marxism is pragmatic. It is interested in identifying the best interests of the working class majority. They're interested in identifying the best interests of the best political interests, the best economic interests of the working class majority within the context of the existing material conditions. So material conditions change, right? Like they're going to be like this today, they're going to be different tomorrow, and we have to adapt. We have to be smart. We have to be on top of things. We have to understand, identify what the interests are of the population, and we have to change our policies to adapt to that. So that's the essential nature of communism. It is for the working class majority. That's what communism is. Whereas I would argue capitalism is very similar. It is almost identical to that, except it's for the ownership class, the owners of industry. That's who they want to identify, the political and economic interests for the ownership class, and then pursue those interests. And that's why you get imperialism, and that's why you get anti-democracy and the mass propaganda. But for the working class, so that's what the Communist Party of China was interested in, identifying and pursuing the interests of the working class majority. So, well, what happened? They took power in 1949. They won a revolution. Then they won the Civil War. And then what happened was the Sino-Soviet split and the Western trade embargo. The Western trade embargo lasted until 1970. The whole time Mao was asking the West to end their trade embargo. So what my argument is, Mao wanted to implement these economic reforms to take advantage of Western markets, Western direct foreign investment. He wanted to take advantage of that way back in 1945, right? But because of the Korean War, because of the Western trade embargo, he wasn't able to make those reforms. And so it wasn't until Nixon and Kissinger went to China in the early 70s, decided to end the embargo. And they only chose to end the embargo because they thought, we can end the embargo, we can benefit from Chinese labor, and then through this economic Trojan horse, we'll be able to take over their political system too. Like, this is what Nixon and Kissinger thought. And so they agreed to end the embargo. And then, of course, it's only natural that once the embargo's ended, these are the material conditions. The material conditions have changed. So we are going to change our economic policies to take full advantage of these new material conditions. It's just natural. So it wasn't opposed by Mao. Again, this is a Western thinking that, Deng represented a total split with what Mao wanted to do. But Mao was the one who lobbied for years and years and years and years for the United States to end their embargo, so that, because it was obviously going to be better for the Chinese people if this embargo is ended. So it's the same thing for Cuba. Like, Cuba doesn't want this embargo to continue. Cuba wants this embargo ended. North Korea wants the embargo ended. Guess what? If we ended the embargo with Cuba or North Korea, those countries are going to reform their economies. They're going to reform their economies in order to take advantage of these economic opportunities. And so the oligarchy knows that. The imperialists, they know that. And that's why they're maintaining this embargo. They don't want the Communist Party of Cuba to be successful, to be sovereign, and to represent an example that the rest of the world would naturally follow, because they would do so well. So again, the Western oligarchy of the United States is interested in making sure that only oligarchies are in charge of these countries. And that's why, we're trying to take out Venezuela. We want to, get the oligarchy back in charge in Venezuela. We want to put the oligarchy back in charge of Iran, get the Shah's son back in there. So, but as far as China goes, the reason why they became successful was, yes, the Western trade embargo was ended. This caused the pragmatic Communist Party to reform their economy, just like Mao wanted to do in 1945. And I can show you quotes from Mao where Mao says, people don't understand why we communists want to proliferate capitalism. Like, we want capitalism as much as possible. The problem isn't capitalism, it's feudal landlordism, which was a problem with China, or it was imperialist oppression, right? So you kick out the imperialists, you kick out the feudalists, and as long as the capitalists obey the laws and are advantageous to the majority, then we're fine with that. So that's the reality of the socialist project in 2026 in a country, in a planet that is dominated by capitalism. And so, but this gets you at the whole struggle. The class struggle continues, and it plays out globally in the struggle against Western imperialism. So Western imperialism is the force of the Western oligarchy, and so they are determined to maintain total global hegemony, and they are doing their best to get rid of any obstacle, any force, any power that represents themselves as an obstacle to Western global hegemony. And so this is how in 2026 the class struggle is playing out. Resistance to Western imperialism and the struggle against Western imperialism is really just the manifestation of class struggle in 2026. And so obviously the empire is targeting China. That's their big peer rival that they are going to do their best to destroy. But before that, they want to take out, Venezuela, Iran. They want to deal with Russia somehow. And then they want to isolate China. And then they want to do another economic embargo like they had before, because they realize that their big plan on, becoming a, economic trade partner with China was a Trojan horse to take them over politically. And like Tiananmen Square was a failed color revolution effort to take over them politically. And so they've realized that we failed to take them over politically. And all we've managed to do is help them become very powerful and prosperous. And so now we're in a bunch of trouble. So now we really need to isolate them and reimpose this trade embargo. And again, that has nothing to do with the interests of humanity or the interests of the vast working class majority on the planet. That has to do with the interests of a tiny elite psychopathic oligarchy who is hell-bent on global domination. They want to control every government, every resource, and every market on the planet. That's what they want, and it's an inexorable drive. Like, it's not something that that they can even, it's not even something they consciously do. It's like it's inexorable. It's not like one of the oligarchs said, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this. No, it's like they can't help it. The only thing that can stop them is really, a power, a more powerful force. That's the only thing that can, they can't help themselves. They're on. I have you muted, David, and I'm sorry. Let me unmute you. So I said a lot, you poor guy. I told you you're in for a long lecture. I'm so sorry.
It's all good. It sounds like communism really only improves or starts to get good if they have a trading partner with a capitalist country. Communism is a giant waste of human capital, and there's whereas innovation come out of China. I'm actually curious, has anything innovative come out of China? Have people been allowed to innovate and excel in China recently in the last few decades, or what's going on there? Or is China just kind of like depending on the US for all of their innovations and intellectual property?
Yeah, no, China is, again, like the lack of appreciation for what China has accomplished is really tragic in the West. But
since they adopted state capitalism, go on.
So you say since they adopted state capitalism, I say since the West ended their unilaterally imposed trade embargo. That's what I'll say. So since the West ended their unilaterally imposed trade embargo, China has freed itself, from this, a straitjacket that the West tried to place them in, and which the West currently places North Korea, Cuba, Iran, Venezuela in. And of course, taking them out of this, has helped them to prosper. But no, look at the number of patents. Just the number of patents. China, I think they account for more, maybe not as a percentage of the population, but more total patents than the U.S. does. And they were only granted WTO status in 2000. So it's only been since 2000 they've really been allowed to engage in the global economy that has been shaped and created by the United States. But no, they are just, man. Like, if you had any idea of what they've accomplished, like, it's like in the last 4 years, they've created more power generation. They've created a United States worth of power generation in the last 4 years. China in the last, and they've done this through solar, wind, and hydroelectric, and also nuclear. So, but yeah, in the last 4 years alone, they've created a whole United States worth of power generation. Anyway, but patents, just no technology. I mean, okay, I was showing my wife this morning. People are closing their car doors in China like this. They go like this with their hand, and their car doors close. Like, I mean, it's like they're the cutting edge of humanity in terms of innovation and just technological advancement in so many ways. And they're just demonstrating the vast superiority of planning, and actually planning in the benefit of the working class majority. See, I think the West plans too, right? The West does their planning, but what they plan for is, how do we benefit and maintain the global oligarchy? How do we benefit and maintain our global power? And then they plan according to that. And that planning has to do with creating 1,000 foreign military bases. It goes it consists of creating a propaganda apparatus in which to constantly disconnect people's minds from reality, and it consists of planning on perpetual war, committing genocides, regime changes, assassinations. Like, this is the planning that the West consists of to benefit the ruling oligarchs. And so it's like one system is so much more preferable and so much more obviously an improvement on the other. And so this is a great discussion, David, because I'm not sure you've ever had anybody explain things to you like this, because I don't really hear people saying these things like in the same way that I'm saying them. But I want to. So one of the reasons we're doing this is because, like, I want to kind of normalize these kinds of exchanges, these kinds of back and forths, and more substantive, more substantial kind of discussions where we're not just talking past each other or getting involved in, calling each other names or whatever, because that happens a lot. Like, I just call most people retarded. I don't want to be an ableist, but I call people names because I'm just so frustrated dealing with text discussions, and so I appreciate this opportunity to have a voice discussion and making you listen to my lecture.
I just want to say, I think you using the term oligarchy kind of takes away the agency of the popular or the majority of Americans. I think people are voting for what they want, and they continually to vote for the regime that they want. They want Western imperialism because Western imperialism is giving them a better life. Capitalism is giving them a better life for a lower cost. As I said earlier, wages have been largely stagnant over the last few decades, largely because there's basically a natural cap on how much an individual can provide in terms of value to another person or to a business. But despite that natural cap, people have been able to afford more for less money. And the reason for that is capitalism, innovation, and improvements in existing technologies. I just bought a 32-inch TV on Amazon for $70. That's, I know healthcare and blah, blah, blah. But the point is that, 30 years ago, a 32-inch TV would be hundreds and hundreds of dollars. The point is, if people are allowed to compete with one another individually on the individual level and without the state intervening and taking away most of their resources, they'll end up driving down costs and pushing up quality. And unfortunately, as I said earlier, evolution is real. And if people can't compete in the capitalist system, if people can't provide value to others in society, why are they here? I know you want to feel like a good person and save everyone, but there's a reason why people are poor. Okay. And there's a reason why it's a struggle throughout generations to, to try to keep everyone alive. People aren't all supposed to be here. And if we just let things go, people, if we let things fall as they may, we'll improve society overall and we'll wash away those who are dragging us down. And that's really, I mean, that's the only way to go forward. That's the only way to progress further as a species. And isn't that what you want as an individual? You're very well off. Do you go to church? Do you volunteer? What is in you that makes you want to advocate for people who have less? Because if you want to give something to someone else, you should just give it to them and see if that helps them out in the long term. It won't, but I encourage you to do so. But advocating for other people to do the same thing as you, absent their consent, I think that is insane and immoral.
Well, so I would argue that, what I'm advocating for is systemic change. I understand that there's always going to be people that are dumb and lazy and who are not going to be very successful. But I think that the system within which we all exist, that's what we can control. That's what we have a lot of say over. And I'm saying the current system within which people are allowed to, people are forced to exist and are to deal with, can be improved a lot. And so again, the number of homeless people in this country compared to homeless in China, like China's doing a lot better as far as homeless go. Home ownership, access to healthcare, access to high quality education. So China is doing with 1.4 billion people, far, far better than what capitalism is doing in the United States with, what do we have? Like 340 million people. So I'm saying there's room for systemic improvement. I'm not saying that I'm going to help every stupid person be intelligent or help every lazy person be industrious, but the system within which we all have to exist and work can be tremendously improved. And I think, the biggest problem is because the current system has been created and is maintained by a class of people who have interests, political and economic, that are often in opposition to the interests of the vast majority of us. And so, my argument again isn't that I want to save all the poor people, or that I want to much less save them by sharing my house with them, right? Like, I'm not going to go under the bridge here and invite all the 20 people there to come and live with me. I should, if I was moral, but what I that's not going to help, right? That's not going to change the system. If everybody did that, it might change this. But no, so I'm interested in systemic change, in removing the reasons for the current system, which is oligarchy, and the power being with these wealthy elites. They're the ones that constructed the system. They're the ones that maintain the system. They're the ones that have the propaganda apparatus designed to perpetuate the system. So all of that has to be overcome. And thank God I can point to China and say, see, they fucking did it. And thank God they did it, because that's great. It's just great to be able to have that proof of success.
There will always be more people who need help than can help. There will always be, there will always be more ugly people than beautiful people. There will always be more dumb people than geniuses.
Right. But the system within which we all have to exist can still be improved. And that's what I'm advocating for.
Right. And I'm saying you're working against the grain and you're trying to push up that which cannot be pushed up. You can't fix poverty. It's never going to go away. You're always going to have the poor people because poor people are poor for a reason. And you're
Well,
expecting other people who
we
aren't
can we
poor
can we can
to
change
pull
the
them
degree
up.
of poverty, right? We can fix that.
Why?
Like, well, okay, the people in Haiti are far more impoverished than people in the United States.
Yeah.
So there's a spectrum, right? Like we can do systemic changes that improve things on degree. The thing is, there's no will to do that because again, the current system is the best of all possible systems for the people that benefit from it, which is the oligarchy. So
And the
there,
rest of the American people.
but I mean, you can't say that the people living under the bridge near me are massive beneficiaries of the system in the same way that the billionaires are.
No, right, right. But I mean, the vast majority of the American people appreciate that they can get a TV on Amazon for $70 delivered to them in 2 days. They don't care about,
Well,
what
China,
the
believe
costs
me,
are.
China has them beat on both counts. China has them beat on price and on the rapidness of delivery.
Okay, yeah, it's since they adopted state capitalism.
Okay. Fair. Okay, I wanted to just make this point. I mean, it's a great illustration. It's called Penn's Parade. So this guy, I think his last name was Penn. He described this parade. And so it's an hour long, and it has the entirety of the United States citizenry is represented, and people are represented based on their height is commensurate with their wealth, right? So people of average wealth have average height. So this parade starts, at minute one, and it starts with real small people because most people don't have anywhere near average wealth, right? Because average wealth is skewed to a top-heavy degree because you have so many people that are worth billions of dollars. So average kind of skews the perception. So you don't even start to see people of average height in this parade until like this the 40th minute or the 45th minute. So everybody is below average height until about like the 45th minute, right? And then you start getting people of average height because they have average wealth. And then at the end, guess how tall, like the last person, like guess how tall this last person is.
I don't know, but I'm curious about the median.
Well, okay. So let me finish my point and we can talk about median. Yeah, no, median is an important metric. So like Elon Musk would reach halfway to the moon. So he's miles tall. So these people, they don't have anything in common with somebody of average wealth. Like they are like a different species entirely. You've got to understand. So I don't know. When you see this like in a picture, and you see that most people aren't even coming to the top of Elon Musk's shoe. It's just really I don't know. To me, it's a really good illustration about wealth inequality and how obscene our wealth inequality is. Just to have so much accumulated in so few hands. And this is the nature of capitalism. It's the nature of an economy that's based on competition, right? Because guess what happens? Competition inevitably creates winners. And those winners inevitably create monopoly or oligopoly. And then they become entrenched. And then those entrenched powers don't have to provide services. They just buy the government and they can perpetuate themselves and they can perpetuate the system. And guess what? That system isn't necessarily going to be designed to help the people that are so tiny compared to their 6 mile high stature. So we can do better. And how do you get control? How do you get the attention? How does somebody of average height get the attention of somebody 6 miles tall, David?
I don't know, but I know this is why we shouldn't use average when we should probably look at the median in most cases.
Well, you've already conceded, David. You've already conceded that the median household is probably doing less well as they were in the 70s, right?
Well, I mean, they probably have the same income level or little bit lower, but they have a higher standard of living because of capitalism.
Well, I would argue that they have less economic security because they have less security to a home, they have less security to healthcare, and they have less security for education. So, so you're right that they've seen a little bit of a decline. So it's like 60% of families today have to have two full-time workers in the home, compared to just 45% in 1970 only needed one worker in the home to have the same income. But then when we talk about the most important things are healthcare, it's 23 times. Wages have gone up like 10 times, 15 times, but healthcare has gone up like 23 times. A car has gone up 30 times. A home has gone up similarly. So some things have gone down. You accurately pointed to a television, because guess what? The oligarchs are happy to program your mind and indoctrinate you. So they are going to make televisions very affordable and easy for you to obtain. And they do. And so that's true. Certain consumer electronics are less expensive than they were before. But overall, when you look at the big picture, there's a broad agreement among even, mainstream economists that the average household is worse off, has less financial security than they did in the 70s, which that's a pretty big indictment against this whole capitalist system. And here's the thing, David, let's check back in 5 years, because in 5 years, I think we're going to have some real significant economic collapses globally and perhaps in this country. And we're gonna have a whole new normal in 5 years, and nobody's going to be able to come on and talk about the benefits of capitalism. And the only way they could do that is to try and blame blame parties that are going to not be
the government, because the government's why houses are so
who
expensive.
Is the government
why
serving?
Healthcare is so expensive. There are laws, there are intellectual property laws, there are regulations, there are you can't build certain places. The government is entirely to blame for the cost of housing going up. We haven't had supply match the increase for the demand. We had an influx of demand over the last 5 years due to all the illegal immigration, not to mention that over time, the population has increased naturally, mostly through immigration. However, the housing hasn't matched it because of all the regulations. I think, London, or maybe just England in general, they have all this land where they can build around the city, the current proper city of London, but they don't build it because there are regulations that have been in place by the government. The solution to the housing problem, the rent problem, isn't to eat the landlords. It isn't to enslave doctors to provide free services. It's to lower the regulations that are keeping people from providing the services and the products that people want. Okay, there's a capitalism is being restrained by the government, by socialism, by the excuses that people come up with to make things as equal as possible, and to preserve the interests of those who already have their property and all their investment, their power as doctors, or their influence as doctors and specialists. We need to lower the regulations and allow for the propagation of new innovations in housing and in medicine in order to lower the prices. It's not to steal from people who are providing value to society and give it to others so that they can afford these exorbitant home prices and these exorbitant medical prices. That's just feeding the beast at that point. The prices are still going to go up and up and up. The only way to drive down prices is to increase the supply or cut the demand. And you're probably against immigration enforcement, right? Legal immigration enforcement. That would be the only way to cut the demand. And so I say maybe increase the supply.
What do you think? What policies does our government pursue that are opposed by the oligarchs?
I don't know.
I would argue that every government policy is a policy that the oligarchy has asked for and gets. So again, I see the government as being representative of the oligarchs.
Well,
and so all
homeowners in general have an incentive to want their the housing prices to increase, or equity goes up. Like, I own my own home. I want my neighborhood to gentrify like 100 times. If my house doubled in value, that would make me incredibly rich. And so I'm going to push for policies through my government in order to push up the housing costs around my neighborhood. I don't want my house to be in a bad neighborhood. You don't want your house to be in a bad neighborhood. You don't want to be around poor people. You want to push up the prices for you because you benefit from it because you're an individual.
No, I mean, that's definitely the self-interest. I mean, there's always going to be self-interest, but if we rationally think about what our actual self-interest is, we're going to understand that our own self-interest shouldn't come at the expense of others, right? And so, you talk about
There's that human nature again that you guys hate.
Well, no, I don't think it's human nature. I mean, again, I think that our nature to be selfish or not be selfish can be tremendously affected by our environment. Like, if you're in a situation where there's scarcity, you're going to be more. There's going to be more competition and more selfishness, and
You're not selfish. Socialists aren't selfish in theory, because you're doing well. Most socialists, I'm sure most of your audience are doing well, despite, however they're doing well, they're doing well. So you have the freedom to advocate for your policies because you're already doing well.
Well, I just think that, there's a collective set of policies that are going to be in the interests of the vast working class majority. And those aren't the policies that are implemented, because I think the policies that are implemented are in the interest of the oligarch minority. And and because the government represents them, that our policies today. And that's why when I asked you, which policies are our governments pursuing that are not in the interest of the oligarchs? And you couldn't name any because there are none.
I don't really understand what you mean by oligarch. The people who own homes want more expensive houses. Okay, is that an oligarchy thing too, or is that separate from the oligarchy thing? Everybody who owns a home wants the prices of houses to go up.
Well, I mean, I agree with you that I want my house price to go up. Tippy Toe says I want my home value to go down so my taxes go down, and I want homes to be more affordable for lower income families. So, I mean, again, no, self-interest is a thing, but I think, self-interest can be exploited, and it can be, magnified to the point where people are just at each other's throats, or, depending on the conditions within which we all exist, it can be something that is really, tamped down and doesn't lead to civil war,
Capitalism exploits selfishness.
Huh? Yeah.
Capitalism exploits selfishness.
That's a much more succinct way of saying what I was trying to say. So
right. Yeah, and that's how we improved everything. That's how we dragged ourselves out of the caves. It's selfishness. And if we're allowed to be selfish, then it benefits everyone eventually.
So I'm saying, when you compare us to China, like, we are losing on a lot of metrics, and I'm saying China is governed by a communist party, and so I'm just saying, what you think is the way to success hasn't worked in the United States, because we've seen since 1970 things have gone down for the median household, and whereas in China, I mean, it's just the trajectory it's exponentially improved.
It hasn't gone down for the median household that owns a home.
You're probably, you might be right. But again, like, a lot of people weren't allowed to own homes in 1970. Well, maybe by 1970 they were, but they were just afforded the right recently. And it's still in some communities, realtors don't bother selling to certain people. But yeah, no, that's cherry picking. You're cherry picking data. I'm just talking about, generally speaking, households in Americans, like, they're, since 1970, their economic situation has deteriorated. It has not improved. So whereas China is totally the opposite, like, you know, wages tripling every 10 years, 40 years in a row, home ownership over 90%, you know, lack of crime, you know, lack of homelessness. So, you know, again, we can just learn a lot from socialist societies, and it only makes sense to try and do that. But again, there's an obstacle to that. The obstacle is oligarchy. The obstacle is the system that we have in the United States. It might suck for a lot of people, and it might be getting worse for a lot of people. But for the people who are represented in government, the oligarch class, the ownership class, this system could not be any better. You know, they have all the power, they have all the wealth, and they do not want, there's no way we can improve the system. From their perspective, this system cannot be improved. And so they're going to maintain it, and they're going to do what they need to, you know, maintain the system, which is what? They're going to divide, distract, indoctrinate, confuse the working class majority so that we are incapable of forming a political power that can hold them accountable, that can demand improvement. They don't want that.
Yeah. You mentioned people not being allowed to buy homes in the 70s. I think that's just so disingenuous. People were and are allowed to buy homes, and the redlining thing, I'm not even going to get into that. But okay, do you know what disparate impact is?
Explain it.
All right, so disparate impact is basically racism by effect. So let's say I'm a lender and I say I'm only going to give out loans to people with credit scores of 750 or higher. Okay, that's a good credit score. You need to have a good credit history. You need to have not a long credit history, but a couple of years of credit history in order to have like a 750 or higher. You need to make all your payments on time. You need to have had like a credit card and maybe a car loan or something in order to establish that credit history. And so if I say as a lender, I'm not going to lend you a home loan unless you have a credit score of great or higher, 750 or higher, that would have a disparate impact on certain demographics in this country, racial demographics. And therefore, that is now illegal to do that. So the businesses, the lenders have been forced to lower their lending standards to basically subprime mortgages in order to allow for the lending to specific racial demographics at it like an equal footing as everyone else. And so there is, anyone can own a home. All you need to have is an income and a low debt and a decent credit score. It takes about 6 months to do it. If anybody is interested in buying a home, contact me. I'll give you advice on it. I'll help you out in 6 months. If you have a decent income, you can probably find a home on Zillow that's within your price range. Now, the problem with this is that disparate impact laws ended up fueling the 2008 financial crisis because the government was intervening in the free market in capitalism and forcing lenders to give products to people who were not financially capable of handling them. And this government intervention, pushed by probably the oligarchs, ended up fueling the financial collapse, which we all went through back in 2008, 2009, et cetera, et cetera.
No, I think there's some truth to that, and I'm really glad that you said that the oligarchs wanted this legislation passed, because I agree with you that they were pushing it because they were going to make more money. You know,
well, it was part of the civil rights legislation. The disparate impact laws were offshoots of the civil rights legislation, basically.
Well, because I mean, you know, so yeah, they were on the one hand ostensibly trying to address historic, you know, racial inequalities where
they wanted to get more minorities in homes, and they did that for a little bit, and then they couldn't afford them because, you know, they were not accepting evolution, and they were trying to put, you know, people in places that they hadn't earned, and look what happened.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure I blame the people that were given a loan. I kind of blame the lending institutions themselves for giving a loan, and I don't know if they had to. And I do know that
They
there
did.
was examples where people of color were given higher interest rates
Right.
compared to white people, even though they had the same people with identical credit ratings. If you were a person of color, sometimes you would have a much higher APR or a much higher mortgage rate. But
Social
I
credit.
mean, okay, so definitely there is some instability with the capitalist economic system. There's
Definitely.
and there was a subprime mortgage crisis. I'm familiar with the argument that wants to blame government ostensibly trying to do good and help people of color, and that's the reason we had this economic collapse. And if we only wouldn't do that, everything would be fine. So
It was the
I
gasoline, basically.
what's that?
It was the gasoline. It was the fuel. It wasn't. There were several elements in that, but the gas. It was the gasoline. It was the fuel that fueled the financial crisis. Without the subprime mortgages, it wouldn't have happened. But I mean, without the bad actions, it wouldn't have happened too. The misappropriations of everything. So there were several hands in the cookie jar. But what started it? What fueled it? Was this for impact laws? Was the intention of getting of equalizing home ownership across the racial spectrum, across the demographic spectrum.
So yeah, and I can't speak substantively to that, and it was a while ago. I understand that there's an interest on the right to blame efforts to do good and to do good things for minorities and people of color, and that they say we shouldn't do that, and that's the reason it almost collapsed. I mean, and I don't think that's true, but I'm not prepared to give you a really good response. I do know that China helped save the global economy because the United States asked China to help stabilize the U.S. market. And so they bought a whole bunch of U.S. treasuries. And all they got was thank you, like one time publicly, and that was it. But really, it was another time that China helped save capitalism.
They
So
probably also helped out by buying properties too when they were on a fire sale in 2008 and 2009 due to all the.
I don't think the government did, but yeah, maybe
No,
individual
the
rich
Chinese.
people.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I mean, but the Chinese government didn't, but maybe individual Chinese people.
And how did they get all that money?
How
The Chinese
did
to buy the houses.
rich Chinese people get rich?
Yeah.
Well, there's rich Chinese people because of the ending of the Western trade embargo and the opening up of
Capitalism. State capitalism. Okay.
Sure. So, and again, okay, yeah, I mean, and the reality is that capitalism, there's a way to maximize the benefits of capitalism. And so we have seen that China has maximized the benefits of capitalism far, far, far more than the United States has maximized the benefits of capitalism. And then we can look at the last 40 years and compare trajectories between China and the United States to see which society capitalism has benefited the most. And we can learn from that. And we can learn that when capitalism is constrained, when capitalism is governed and disciplined by a communist party of, for, and by the working class majority, capitalism can be beneficial. That's what China proves. At least with given the current material conditions. I think that we could do way, 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 way better than what China is currently doing. And I know China is doing way, 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 way better than what the United States is currently doing. So like the future is like, it's, Star Trek kind of stuff is possible, but not with the kind of capitalism that, the right wing is trying to promote where, well, number one, like the right wing, they're disconnected from reality because they're not dealing with the reality of oligarchy and the reality that the oligarchy doesn't want things to change. You guys talk about changing things as if you can just hey, let's just get the government out of business and then everything will be fine. Well, the oligarchy doesn't want government out of business. The oligarchy and the government are the same thing. Like, that's what socialism is about. It's about taking the oligarchy out of government. That's socialism. And so making the government representative of the people, that's socialism. So, the right wing doesn't get that. And it's like, so I think you're just kind of disconnected and detached from the reality of class struggle. And you don't understand that the oligarchy is not interested in doing any kind of reforms, because guess what? It's the perfect system for them. There's no improving the system from their perspective.
The oligarchy, I don't really accept the premise of oligarchy. I'm sorry. The American people have votes. Are you assuming that we're all just brainwashed cattle who I mean, there's no one who's been able to overturn that. There's with the
okay.
internet.
Well, no, let me address that, because you reminded me of some thoughts I had that I haven't said yet. So who won the last election? The last election was won in a landslide. Did not vote. 47% of eligible voters did not vote in the last presidential election because they already know intuitively that their vote doesn't count and no party represents them.
They could have voted in primaries. They could have ran themselves.
It was 27% to the Democrats, 27% to the Republicans, and 47% did not vote. So this is always the does not vote always wins in every landslide. So that's number one.
That's that vote.
People intuitively understand that this democracy is bullshit. Now, why was Trump popular? Because he called it out. He called it out as bullshit. He said, this fucking establishment sucks. I'm going to come in, I'm going to represent the people, and I am going to drain the swamp. And that's why he was popular. But he was lying about it, right? He was lying about it. And he just knew what Americans were thinking. He knew we hated the establishment. He knew that we knew that their establishment sucks. And so again, to suggest that the voting system is not completely rigged and dominated by the oligarchy themselves, and that's just one aspect of it. And then the other aspect is this nonstop indoctrination, detaching people's minds from objective reality. So
that doesn't happen in China?
No, I would argue that it does not happen in China.
How does it not happen in China?
What?
How does it not happen in China?
Well, because there's censorship laws. China does not allow oligarchs to buy up, media monopolies and to saturate people's minds with bullshit. They don't allow it.
So you're arguing for censorship too?
We're not. We have censorship is a given, of course. We don't have censorship in the United States?
I'm not saying we don't. I'm just saying, are you arguing for
censorship is necessary? We're in a class war.
Oh, okay. So only
okay. So again, from the perspective, from the perspective of class struggle, from the perspective of a war over ideology, from a class war to win hearts and minds and to win people's perceptions and opinions, right? It's a struggle of information. And so the West, of course, is winning that struggle. They're winning the class war, right? Because they've got their oligarchies in place in all the Western countries. They're winning the information war because they control and dominate the global propaganda apparatus. China has separated itself from that. They've developed the Great China Firewall. They have separated themselves and they censor Western propaganda designed to manipulate and then fracture their society along any lines possible and create turmoil and unhappiness. Like China has no interest in allowing the West to do that like we do in all the other countries. So they're smart. They understand reality. They understand the reality of class struggle. Because why? Because they're Marxist, because it's a communist party. So everything I'm talking about, like they get it and they're taking measures to deal with it. But again, this is just the reality. This is what class struggle is. And I just find that when I talk to people, like you just have this totally different understanding of what is going on than I have of what is going on.
Well,
so it's good.
You want everybody who's not saying what you want You want to put duct tape over anyone's mouth who disagrees with you.
No, that's what happens in the United States too. So the United
Well,
States.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen in the United States.
Okay, well, I'm telling you, there's two choices.
For censorship.
You can either put duct tape over people's mouths because they're telling lies, like China does, or you can put duct tape over mouths of people who are telling the truth, like the United States does. So, what other choices are there? You think there's a neutral country that can exist on this planet that isn't going to be forced to take a side in the class struggle?
I'm just curious, what's being censored in the United States regarding communism? Because it seems like communism and socialism seems to be in vogue in the media. I mean, just what's being censored in the United States regarding speech?
Well, no, I mean, it's obvious, right? So again, the oligarchy controls both of our political parties. The oligarchy controls the platforms of mass communication, right? All the newspapers, all the TV channels.
But what are they actually censoring?
No, well, they tightly control the views that are expressed. They don't allow views on there that for like what I say. Like, there's nobody saying the truth that I'm espousing to you today on any of the establishment press. And if somebody did for 1 second fucking say anything like I'm telling you, they would be off the air in perpetuity. Like, that's obvious, David.
Well, I mean, I see socialists all the time in the media. I don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, look, there is a very narrow window of acceptable discussion, and they're not socialists. There's no socialists in the media. There's some Western sellout Marxists that the liberals. There's like Bernie Sanders, like milquetoast liberals, and he's about the extent of what you can have as far as the window that is allowed in the mainstream. Now, you could say that social media is a little bit different, right? There's I haven't been, I mean, a lot of people have. I still have a YouTube channel. I still am able to post on Facebook. But a lot of people have been dropped for the things that they say. And I expect that they can change. Like, they control it, right? These are platforms controlled by oligarchs. And we saw what happened with TikTok, right? What happened with TikTok, David?
I don't know what happened with TikTok.
Okay. Well, I mean, I could play for you a clip where the new ownership, Larry Ellison, just said that anybody that uses Zionism as a pejorative is going to get blocked. So you can say Zionism in a good way, but if you say Zionism in a bad way, you're off their platform, David. So no,
kind of like the N-word.
Yeah, I have never had any interest to use the N-word, so I wouldn't know.
But you want to use Zionist?
Well, yeah, I mean, a Zionist is a political ideology, and so I think that we can talk shit about abhorrent political ideologies. I mean, that's what we do. But I mean, I don't know if it's right to disparage people for innate characteristics that they have no control over. I mean, that's stupid. But so no, there's a lot of, so the thing is, like, every society is going to censor. There's no such thing as free speech, right? There's always person, place, and time restrictions. And there's also going to be restrictions on, how you use your platform and what you say. Like, if you're just spreading lies on a platform, I think you ought to be censored. I don't think
the communist people, they're allowed to say whatever they want. The problem is nobody wants to hear it.
Say that again.
The communists are allowed to form their own little parties and say whatever they want. The problem is nobody wants to hear it. The reason why Bernie Sanders doesn't go full communist is because nobody wants to hear it. He wouldn't get the votes. The people would not vote for him. It's because everybody knows it doesn't work.
Well, again, so
unless you add state capitalism.
When you talk about the people, I would say that there's no such thing as the people. There's two classes of people. There's the class of people that control everything, that control the establishment press, they control the elections, they control the money and who gets funded in what elections. Like, so those people wouldn't want to hear anything Bernie Sanders said. I would say that the actual people would be very interested. And we know that, the Democratic Party itself cheated Bernie Sanders a couple times because what he was saying was very appealing, even if he's just a milquetoast liberal.
They cheated him in the primary because there's no way he would have won the general election.
Well, he didn't. Hillary didn't win the election anyway. So I'm not sure that's a satisfactory explanation. I mean, you can say that that's why they did what they did. I would argue that that's not why they did what they did. But we're both speculating. No, I think Obviously, the American people have had a cradle to grave indoctrination, and for generations now, into the religion of anti-communism, into the religion of liberalism, big L liberalism, which, is again the ideology of the oligarchy. This is the ideology that benefits them. This is the ideology they can manipulate and exploit. And so, yeah, that is definitely a challenge for people, for us who are actually interested in improving society. And when we understand that when it comes to improving society, there's a primary obstacle is that society is owned by a class of elite pedophiles. Like those are the people that, are going to be fighting against us. And they're going to use their control over the media, over the electoral system, over the political parties, their control of capital itself, to make sure that we are never able to, develop a political force that can ever hold them accountable or force improvements.
I just, you said you live in California.
I did.
Have you lived like in big cities, liberal cities your whole life? I mean, have you done any, like, have you lived in the Midwest or, like smaller towns? Have you, I don't want to be like an asshole, but I'm like, every time I talk with a socialist or a communist, it's like, have you met people? It's like you blame the oligarchy for all these things, and unfortunately, man, a lot of people, arguably most people, are for what you're saying the oligarchy is for. People, like I said, people want higher home prices. People, they want to be ahead of everyone else. That's just Americanism. And so just go to a smaller town and meet some smaller town people, and you'll find that they align with the oligarchs that you're speaking of. That's why they elect them. That's why they choose them in the primaries. They prefer what's being done. They prefer the system as it is. Now, they don't always get what they want, which is why they're always bitching. But that's just human nature again. People get what they want, and it's not what they want. It's not exactly what they want, so they want more and more and more. People are never satisfied. People have an infinite, people will always want more and more different things, and there's never like going to be a satisfaction, because that's not how humans were designed by evolution or their creator. Because once you're satisfied, you start to degrade, and so naturally people always want more. That's why people are never satisfied with their elected official, even if they voted for them and they only get partially what they want because of democratic compromises.
Harvard did some anonymous polling in China, and they found that 96% of the Chinese were either satisfied or highly satisfied with the central government.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Okay, and then when they did that polling here, guess how many were satisfied or highly satisfied?
I don't know, but I'm sure the Chinese are afraid of their government.
No, I said anonymous polling. It was like anonymous Western polling.
Okay. I'm sure they trusted that too.
No, I'm sure they did. So I'm sure Harvard isn't going to. I mean, have you ever been like, people in China are not cowering in fear. Like, people in China are living their best lives, I promise. But yeah, so it was anonymous polling. I have total faith in the polling. Basically, yeah. So for good reason. Like, David, if you were seeing your wages triple every 10 years for 40 years in a row, I mean, you'd probably be satisfied too with your government. So no, these are believable, right? So for you to try and suggest that, they were lying because they're scared of the government, like, it's preposterous, but whatever.
Well, I'm sure they are happy because of the increasing, standard of living over there.
Of fucking course they are, David.
Why is it increasing?
Okay, so why did you say that they're scared of their government?
Because of state capitalism, because they adopted state capitalism.
Why would you say they're afraid of their government? It's just like your reflexive.
Because I mean, have you studied Chinese history? You know why the Chinese would be afraid of their government? Come on.
No, again, so who's going to be afraid of the Chinese government is the capitalists, because they have to, right. They're disciplined. So the Chinese government is
opposing views, right?
The Chinese government is comprised, it's, by, for, and of, the working class. So the working class are not afraid of their government. 96% of them are highly satisfied or satisfied with the government, compared with 38% in the United States. The same exact question, same exact polling, you get 38% in the United States. That was related to another thing that you had said, and I already forgot what that was, because we've been going for a little while. But no, I was gonna say I appreciate, so you're articulating, what you just said a few minutes ago was a good articulation of a perspective, and it's a legitimate perspective, where you're talking about, people in rural communities, voting for what they want, and they're not always sad, they don't always get what they want, but it's still, they appreciate the country. Like, that's a valid, true perspective. I would argue that, there's several factors to consider. There's the cradle to grave generational indoctrination into anti-communism, liberalism, and American patriotism, American exceptionalism. I mean, all of that plays a big role in people's opinions. But when you look at objective data, like over the past, since 1970, the median household has stagnated or declined as far as economic security. Like, that's important, and people understand that. And again, I think that, to suggest that people are satisfied with the establishment and not just sick to death of both Republicans and Democrats and the whole oligarchic system, like, I think there's a lot of hatred. And again, that's what explains Donald Trump. And you're going to see a lot of people not voting, and then a lot of people voting for the other side. And that's just how they play this bullshit democratic theater, where, they play one side off against the other in perpetuity. But both teams play for the same owners, and so that's why it's like professional wrestling in that regard. And people are becoming aware of it, and I think we're set to have a real big change. Like, there's going to be a new normal before too long. Probably some big wars, probably some big some global shifts economically, and I think you might get a lot of people waking up in a way that they haven't needed to, right? They've had the luxury of being able to just exist and enjoy their lives for the most part, and not having to be really politically aware. But as we get more politically aware, I think it's important to understand what socialism actually is, understand what socialism actually says, understand what socialism has actually accomplished, especially in places like China. And now you can say it's through the economic reforms, which definitely were necessary to take advantage of the ending of the economic embargo against China. And again, the communists in China wanted to do those reforms in 1945, but couldn't because, at least 1949, 1950, when the embargo was implemented, they weren't able to do it. So the Communist Party didn't take power until 49. Then there you had the Korean War, and the Korean War started the trade embargo against China.
I have a question about China. So, like, they're a pretty big country. What was the problem? I mean, why couldn't they do it? I mean, why couldn't they? Why did the embargo make them so poor? I mean, what they have resources. They have. I mean, what made them so poor from the embargo? I mean, why couldn't they have done it themselves without state capitalism being adopted?
Well, in 1949, it was basically the end of a century of foreign occupation and humiliation, right? So you had the Opium Wars. You had, 30% of people addicted to opium. You had landlordism. It was feudalism. It was just a basket case. It was probably the poorest country on the planet in 1949 when they got their independence. And then, of course, you had the Korean War. And then you had the trade embargo, and you had the Sino-Soviet split. So these were all things that forced China into an economy of self-sufficiency. And so a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that the economy of self-sufficiency was an ideological choice made by socialism. Like, it was Marxist ideology that made China want to engage in an economy of self-sufficiency. So this is just a real fundamental ignorance with a lot of socialists, but obviously most who aren't socialists don't really understand the pragmatic nature of Marxism and socialism and communism. So the self-sufficiency wasn't an ideological choice. It was one forced upon China due to the Sino-Soviet split, the Western trade embargo. And what they were able to accomplish despite this economic isolation and the self-sufficiency was amazing. It was spectacular. Like, they built the foundation upon which they were able to unprecedentedly develop upon, once the Western trade embargo was lifted.
They were really poor until the state capitalism. But why did? But the country's so big. They had so many people. Why so many resources? Why couldn't they get their shit together by themselves? What was the issue there?
Well, I would fundamentally just reject the premise of your question. And so, ever since the Communist Party came to power in 1949, they started getting their shit together. And listen to this, David, it's very important, with unprecedented efficiency. Do you understand what I'm saying? The Chinese Communist Party, with unprecedented efficiency, got China's shit together. So, when you say, why couldn't they get this shit together? I'm telling you, more than any country in the history of the known universe, China got their shit together, the most efficient that we've ever seen in anywhere. I mean, so the premise of your question is just false. It belies a total ignorance of what China's accomplished. But I just explained that.
I don't know a lot about China. Was that before? That was before the Cultural Revolution, right?
Yeah, well, so there's this Western historiography that totally mythologizes and distorts China's history. It says that the GLF was the greatest man-made famine of all time. It killed 60 million people, and then you had millions more killed during the Cultural Revolution. And I'm saying, like, those are anti-communist mythologies that are shoved down everybody's throats because you go to school in the West and that's what you're indoctrinated to learn and believe. But it doesn't really have anything to do with actual historic reality.
Right. I'm just trying to figure out why they were so poor until.
Okay, I told you. So in 1949, they were poor because they had 100 years of British humiliation where Britain forced on them certain policies that were detrimental to their country. Right. So they lost the war with Britain. They endured rich. They endured 100 years of humiliation, and then the Chinese Communist Party came to power, and they started to get rich. Yes.
And when around what time though? What years?
In 1949, with unprecedented efficiency, they started improving. In fact, one metric that's important, David, is longevity. So longevity, the fastest increase in longevity ever recorded was in China from 1949 till the end of Mao in like 1976. That is the most efficient increase in longevity. So that's just one metric about how they started to prosper.
So they were prosperous in the 70s then?
Okay, prosperous. Okay, so again, David, they were the poorest country on earth in 1949. They became more prosperous, unprecedentedly. Do you understand the trajectory? The trajectory was unprecedented. So, if you're going to define prosperity as related to the U.S., right? Again, the United States was the beneficiary of a World War II in which 50 million communist deaths and 50 million, a communist victory over fascism resulted in the United States accounting for half the global economy, being untouched within their borders and having their industry firing on all 6 cylinders. So this was a very fortunate, unearned privilege position that the United States found themselves in. So when you want to compare China, the poorest country on earth, to the United States, the richest country on earth by far, that's not a very good comparison, right? So yeah, if comparing China to the United States, China was not more prosperous than the United States in 1970. But compare China in 1949 to China in 1970, yes, they were very prosperous because they had decreased astronomically from how they were in 1949. And again, longevity is one metric. They'd almost doubled their life expectancy. By the time Mao left, life expectancy had practically doubled in China. Guess what else doubled was total population. Caloric intake doubled. So it was just really unprecedented. China was known as the land of famine. So one of the first things that the Chinese Communist Party did was to upgrade and modernize their agricultural system to make it impervious to the inclement weather conditions that resulted in regular cyclical famine, pretty much an average of one famine a year for 2,000 years. That's pretty much what China had. And yet within barely a decade, China had forever eradicated famine. That's what the Communist Party accomplished, while they were raising life expectancies and increasing caloric intake and doubling the population.
So the prosperity in the 70s was, how good would you say it was to the actually, when was the Chinese embargo ended? I'm
70, 71, 72.
okay, and so before that they weren't doing well. After that, they were doing well.
No, again, so they had an economy of self-sufficiency forced upon them, and it was during this economy of self-sufficiency that I'm explaining that living longevity doubled, population doubled, caloric intake doubled during the period of self-sufficiency. So the Communist Party of China was doing the best they could with very few resources. Now, by the way, China is not a resource-rich country. Okay, so if you Google this, you'll see that like they get like a number 38, whereas like a country like Russia is like maybe a 500. So when you compare certain resources, China is really not resource rich. They're one of the more resource poor countries compared to other countries that are. But anyway, so yeah, no, it's unprecedented. It's unbelievable what they were able to accomplish despite the Sino-Soviet split, despite the Western trade embargo. What they had to work with, they made go very far. And again, their trajectory was unprecedented. Their accomplishments were unprecedented, and the efficiency to which things were improved and industrialization took place is just never been seen in history ever, especially for a population so big. Like, I mean, you can do it in a little city state like Singapore or Hong Kong, but to do it in a whole country of 1.4 billion people. And again, the best comparison, apples to apples comparison, is comparing China to India. So you compare China to India. China, because they both have a similar population, similar geographic size, both got their independence at the same time. China has lapped India 6 times over as far as economic growth. So that just, again, it underscores what a communist party is capable of when your government genuinely represents the interests of the working class majority, as opposed to just representing the interests of the oligarch minority. And this is the struggle. This is what socialism is about. This is why socialism is necessary. It's the class struggle against oligarchy, against the ruling class being the ownership class. We want to replace the ruling ownership class with the ruling class being of, by, and for the working class. That's what socialism. And so that's a good thing. That's improvement. That's what we're saying. And I think if, I don't know why anybody would argue with that or say, no, that's a bad thing. No, we need to continue our oligarchy. And that's how we perceive right wingers to be. And so we try and figure out, well, why are right wingers not agreeing with us that improving our situation here would involve replacing this oligarchy with a government that represents the working class? China's did it, and China's spectacular success is proof that that's what we need to do too. That's the benefit that China provides. But yeah, we see that people, right on the right wing, we just think you're confused, because if you understood what we think is the reality, how we do, like you would be marching arm in arm with us. Yeah, let's unite around these shared interests of getting rid of the oligarchy and putting in a government that represents the working class majority. I mean, that's democracy. So we just think it's a matter of educating you and cluing you into this particular understanding, which I think happens to be, correct. It correctly explains reality. It correctly describes what the problems are, what the obstacles to improvement are, what improvement would look like. And again, we can point to China as being the best success of that. And when we look at Cuba, we can understand why Cuba has not had that amazing success, because they've been under this trade embargo that China was let out of in 1970. And guess what? The oligarchy knows that was a mistake. They shouldn't have ever let China out of their economic straitjacket, because now China's that example that they were really trying to keep Cuba from achieving, trying to keep Venezuela from achieving. Anyway, David, you're a good listener.
It sounds like to me that China hammered out how to make communists, basically stop the bleeding that communism causes by, basically not perfecting, but improving their distribution of resources, etc., and not having millions of people die every year due to their famines. So it sounds like they figured that out when they had to be self-sufficient. And then once, state capitalism became a thing in China, it allowed for prosperity to be infused into the country through the utilization of
Okay.
the human capital that was available to them,
No,
although
let me.
capped by the government, of course.
It's an important point I want to make about state capitalism, because, again, Mao wanted state capitalism in, in the 40s, 1945. Mao was opining for more capitalism. We need capitalism. Capitalism is going to help develop the productive forces. But it's a capitalism, governed and disciplined by a communist party that represents the people. And it's not a capitalism that allows the capitalists to control the government. So this is the fundamental difference. Now, Lenin also said that socialism is essentially state capitalism made to serve the people. And I keep spitting on my screen. So no, ideologically, when you say state capitalism, you might see I think you think that you are indicting my ideology, and you were telling me that your ideology doesn't work. It only works when it embraces state capitalism. And I'm saying that's a misunderstanding of my ideology. My ideology is saying that socialism is state capitalism presided over by a communist party and forcing the capitalist part of the economy to work for in the service of the working class, and again, that is what China is showing to be the best way given the current material conditions that we are facing. And again, those material conditions are, we still have most of the planet is governed by capitalist powers, very powerful capitalist powers, and private capital, and so within that context, you're going to suffer if you don't allow some capitalism, like North Korea has suffered, which they're doing good now. I mean, they're getting stronger. Cuba, of course, has suffered. But why are they suffering? Are they suffering because of their ideology, or are they suffering because of the Western imperialists and the oligarchs, confining them to this economic straitjacket that they otherwise would take off?
Well, you're trying to manage everything. You want embargoes lifted. You want other countries to abide by your ideals. You want people to abide by what you want. You're basically against freedom and speech, and that's fine. But I just when you suppress individuals, when you suppress ideas, when you suppress people, you're not going to improve society. You're going to stagnate. You're going to be poor, as China was until they introduced state capitalism. I don't really understand how you think things will improve without capitalism.
Well, I mean, I just finished complaining or explaining. I just finished explaining that I'm not about abolishing capitalism. I'm about containing and constraining capitalism, like China's doing. I'm about having a government that represents the working class.
Billionaires, like you want to get rid of billionaires, I assume.
Well, China has a lot of billionaires, but I definitely don't want to give them the power over the government, right? I want to take the billionaire power for the billionaire to buy the government away. So
How
again,
do you think they're buying the government.
What?
How do you think they're buying the government?
Because they own both political parties. They are the ones, running all the campaigns for all the politicians. They buy all the politicians. They buy the political parties. They own the media. They own the banks. So China's different, right? So in China, the party, there's one party, and it represents the people. The party owns all the banks. The party decides who gets the money, who gets lending. They decide what projects are going to be funded, and they also constrain the media. And there's censorship laws. There's if you want to spread a bunch of divisive lies, we're going to shut you down. There's so it's fundamentally different. So a socialist society is fundamentally different than a capitalist society. Capitalist society is when the oligarchs own the government, own the media, and run it in the interest of the extremely wealthy minority. Socialism is when the government is representative of the working class majority and disciplines the capitalists, disciplines the media, any capitalists that own private media, because there is private media in China, but they got to be careful what they say.
People can say whatever they want in the U.S. I mean, there's no. You think that communism can only work if we suppress speech, right? I mean, you have to have censorship in order to have communism. Is that right?
Well,
you have to silence the billionaires. You have to silence the millionaires. You have to keep the homeowners from voting because they're driving up the housing costs. It's maybe not have any landlords. So, I mean, abolish, second homes.
So, the Chinese government understands the reality of class struggle, right? And they understand that they represent the working class, and that there's an ownership class.
Right. The Democrats represent the working class too, right?
Well, I don't believe that. I mean, of course, the Democrats say that, but the Republicans also say that.
Yeah, everybody says it because the working class is the majority, and you have to appeal to the self-righteous majority in order to get elected. And in order to get power, you have to tell people what they want to hear.
Well, but again, I mean, what they really are up to, they're not just trying to tell them what they want to hear. They're really interested in shaping how they think, right? Again, there's this cradle to grave propaganda apparatus designed to indoctrinate and detach people from the reality I'm explaining. And then
you're removing agency from people. You seem to think we're all stupid. We're all brainwashed into this capitalist propaganda bullshit. No, we have increasing standards of living. Anybody can get a home within 6 months. You just have to have a job, and you have to have no debt, and you can find one probably within 30 miles of you that's affordable in any state other than California and New York. And the reason why you can't in California and New York is because of the socialists.
I don't think there's any socialists in government. If there were socialists in government, they would have been executed. They would have been assassinated, like MLK was assassinated.
I want to clarify something. When I say socialist, because it's a slippery term, I see it as a spectrum between communism.
So you mean liberals? You mean liberals?
I mean, socialism is the spectrum between like anarcho-capitalism and communism. Everything in between there is the spectrum. A little bit of government is a little bit of socialism. A lot of government is communism or close to communism. So that's what I mean when I say socialism.
No, that's a good. I mean, it's important, for you to articulate, the way that you conceive of these things. I mean, I totally reject that way of thinking, and I think that way of thinking detaches your mind from the objective reality. But it's important, I mean, that
what's the objective reality?
Well, a class struggle, and the idea that
Everybody's
the ownership
struggling.
What's that?
Everybody struggles. Even the people on top are struggling to stay on top. In capitalist societies, at least. In China, I'm sure the ruling class in China are fine because they don't have to worry about staying on top because it's mandated.
Well, I mean, so the important reality and the important distinction that I see is, again, that who is the ruling class? Is the ruling class the working class, or is the ruling class the ownership class? In the West, the ruling class is the ownership class, and that's fundamentally different than the ruling class in China.
When you say ownership class, you're meaning people with capital?
Yeah, I mean the owners of the industry.
Who have utilized their human capital to acquire capital?
I mean, there's a lot of ways that people accumulate ownership. I mean, and so there's some that have created
They're stealing through the government, which arguably are both, or they earn it by providing value to society, to other people. That's how you get money. You utilize your human capital, you build your human capital, and then you trade it for a compensation, which allows you to buy, traditional capital like a home, or a second home, or an investment property, or whatever you want. I mean, given the freedom that capitalism, if you have freedom, you can exercise capitalism as an individual to gain capital, to become part of the ruling class, the ones with the property, the ones with power. You have that opportunity right now. There's nothing outside of your reach other than what you're limited to as an individual. And individuals are limited in respect to what they can achieve potentially. Everyone doesn't have limitless potential. Everyone has, good points and bad points. And if they focus on their best points, if they sharpen their best points, they can utilize them to get as much as they can out of society, as much in return for exchanging what they're best at. So you say oligarchy, but you mean those who have understood what it takes to succeed in the system that we have, which is improving themselves and thereby improving society, and increasing the livelihoods and well-being of everyone around them and themselves. It's harnessing selfishness in order to create prosperity for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, and I understand that perspective. And I mean, again, we can point to China and see the same thing, right? There's people that work hard and accumulate and then own. The owner of Huawei, right? He's done really good. He developed this impressive corporation. You have other real big owners in China, private owners, but ultimately they don't also own the government, right? And so the government understands.
They're pretty afraid of the government, though, right?
Well, so if you go to Wikipedia, you can read a quote by the owner of Huawei, and what he explains is that he used to be part of the People's Liberation Army, and if it ever came to where he had to choose between the interests of his own corporation and the Communist Party, he's going to side with the Communist Party. And whether or not he really believes that, who knows? But I think he does, because I think, like, again, these people, in China, they aren't. What I'm saying is the normal for them. Like, they understand class struggle. They understand that the Communist Party represents the people. They understand that in the West, the government is controlled by the oligarchs. They understand that in the West, the oligarchy creates the system within which everybody in the West has to exist, and that the people themselves don't have any say over what that system looks like. So this is the reality. And so, it's not like they're cynical liberals over there that are just saying things out of fear. It's like they really understand things in the same way I'm explaining things is my belief. But
I don't think you understand that people are getting what they want. I mean, the system that we have now is what people want. And if they don't want it anymore, they're not going to have it anymore. People get what they want. And
well, I don't know. For you to say that, so people don't want to have their households economically stagnant for 1970. Let's count the years. Is that 50 years? That's like 50 years, right? 56 years. They don't want economic stagnation for 56 years, David.
There hasn't been economic stagnation. Their livelihoods have improved.
No. Okay, so are we going to rehash that?
We're like, better off now than we're in the 70s. We have
no. I just made I thought we agreed. I thought we had agreement there that that's not true. So most economists, even mainstream economists, agree that the median household is doing worse, has less economic security than they did. So the wages have gone up. The wages have gone up. But the important things such as healthcare, education, homes, and cars have gone up far faster, whereas consumer goods have gone down. So you take the total picture, and no, people aren't better off, especially when you consider the fact that it now takes 2 household wage earners to do what used to be able to be done just by one. So I thought we established this a long time ago, and now you're like reneging on what I thought we agreed on, but that's okay.
I don't know what you mean. People's households have improved. My house today is much better than it was in the 1970s. I have more. I was able to buy my house a couple of years ago, no problem. Single income, no problem. I just was able. Things change, and you have to change with them. That's reality, and that's how capitalism adapts. It adapts to change. Communism doesn't adapt to change. If there's a change in communism, hundreds of millions of people die.
Okay. So, I mean, I gave you a long lecture
in the United States in the 1970s. Things have been changing. Things always change. The climate changes naturally. Everything changes naturally. Change is going to happen. You can't avoid it. You have to move with the changes. And the people who are, the people who are dragged down by, the changing times need to change with it. That is evolution. Again, evolution is real. You have to change with the environment. You have to change with things outside of your control and accept what is outside of your control. You can try to blame rich people that you'll never meet. You can try to blame, the politicians or whatever. But when it comes down to it, if you want to succeed, if you want prosperity in your own life, you have to change yourself. You have to build your human capital. And when you do, you acquire more money. And when you acquire more money, you're going to have a better life yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, so again, it's not a question of
And by the way, that's not possible in China. You're capped in China. You can only get so much in China, and then you're going to be happy with that, or I don't know what happens, but there's a cap to your prosperity. There's a cap to the homes that you can afford. And
I mean, it's my understanding that more billionaires are made in China every day than are made in the United States. So I'm not sure what you're referring to about some kind of a wealth cap in China. Definitely, you're not allowed to influence the party. You're not allowed to buy politicians. There's been a huge anti-corruption drive going on since 2016, trying to eliminate, that kind of corruption.
So the average factory worker in China can become a billionaire.
So the average factory worker in China, again, has seen their wages triple every 10 years for 40 years in a row. Now, you compare that to the past 56 years in the United States, where average household economic security has deteriorated due to home prices, car prices, education prices, and healthcare prices outpacing their increases in wages. I mean, again, and then you talk about you can't change in communism, and we just explained. I mean, I lectured you how long about how they change. Like they're about changing. They're about identifying the interests of the working class and adapting their policies to take advantage of the existing material conditions in accordance with the interests of the working class. But and then you talk about factory workers being billionaires. Like, I mean, I guess again, I think they have more of a chance to be a billionaire in China than they do in the United States. Maybe that's not true. I know there's more billionaires being created in China, but that's also true because there's a lot more people. There's like 3 or 4 times the population size. So maybe per capita you might technically be right, but no. Again, it's just like when you start talking about things, it demonstrates that your understanding of socialism and communism is not my understanding of socialism and communism. Your understanding of the current capitalist system is different than my understanding of the current capitalist system. And it is enjoyable, and I do appreciate this discussion, this dialogue, this back and forth. And you've been very respectful. I've tried to be respectful. I started at 9:30 and it's now 1:30. What is that? So 4 hours. I've been going for 4 hours, talking and listening, live streaming. So I apologize for my own whatever. I might be rambling. I might not be that focused. I'm doing my best, and I'm not really watching the chat either. But this is good, David. Is this everything you'd hoped for, or did you think it was going to be better, or what?
Yeah, I'm having fun. If you want to go over the chat and shoot any shots at me from that, that's cool.
Well, okay. Let me think about shots at you. You're just. I mean, you're explaining your worldview. You're explaining the typical defense of the system and the typical, reticence and antipathy towards what you think is my system. And again, like we started out this show, it's like when you start saying, I don't want capitalism, I don't want communism because communism doesn't change. I mean, it's like, no, communism does change. We just disagree on that. And then you say, I don't want communism because your wealth is capped. I'm like, well, look at China. Your wealth isn't capped. I mean, they're doing far better than they are here. So no, I think we just have these fundamental disagreements about what is. And you think that what is different from I think, what is. And that's the issue. And I think what is like I've been saying, if we want to improve in the West, in the United States, it's going to involve getting rid of this entrenched oligarchy that owns both political parties, the media, all the banks, all the policies. They own, people's opinions. Like that's a lot to overcome.
How about the homeowners?
What about homeowners?
Should maybe the homeowners no longer own their homes?
Well, again, dude. Again, China has way higher home ownership.
We're not talking about China. I'm talking about here.
We're comparing.
The homeowners here are voting for policies that are increasing the value of their homes. Okay, so the reason why homeowners, homes, housing, etc., are so expensive now is because voters are deciding that they want more expensive houses, and the people who vote usually, I'm not usually, I can't speak to usually, but people who vote probably own homes. A lot of people who vote own homes, and they want their houses to increase in value. They want to have more equity in their homes. So, I mean, should they be allowed to a say then in the People's Republic of the United States, or is that too much? Because I mean, you're going to have to silence the homeowners if you want the cost of housing to go down in the United States.
I mean, so ultimately, you're going to have a political party in charge. That's it. Like, there's no escaping the reality of having a political party in charge of a state, right?
Right. So,
right.
So the homeowners getting a vote then?
No, the question is, what policies are going to be pursued by that party, and that's the question that's going to be asked in every society that there exists.
Well, we want lower home prices, right? You want lower home prices, right? You want other people to own homes, right? So you're going to have to drag down the cost of homes, which means people who own homes will have less equity. They're not going to want that, so they're going to vote against that. So they either don't vote, or what's going to happen?
I'm not really following your argument. What I'm trying to explain is that I'm not pushing a particular policy. I'm saying that ideally people will own their own homes because rent seeking isn't really good for the economy. Now, some people prefer to rent and some people do rent in China, but there's 90-something% home ownership rate. I think that's a good thing. I don't think homes should be bought for speculation, and I think that causes a lot of problems with the market, and it causes a lot of rent-seeking kind of behavior that isn't beneficial for the national economy.
It pushes up the prices of homes.
What's that?
It pushes up the prices of homes.
Speculating?
People buying, investment properties, or BlackRock investing in home ownership. That pushes up the price of homes, and that benefits the homeowners. So
I wouldn't be opposed. I wouldn't be opposed to legislation that was saying, you can't have investment properties. You can own your home, but I think that's what China does, and I think we could learn a lot from what China does.
What about regulations preventing new homes being built? Like I mentioned earlier, in London, they have all this land, all this green, beautiful land that they want to preserve, but if they built homes, it would drive down the costs of existing homes, and so they're not going to build because it's so beautiful and green, and not because all of the middle class people in London want their investments maintained.
I mean, it's tough for me to opine on different hypothetical situations and what policies I would argue for. I mean, the major, most important point is right now, those policies are being decided by the party in charge. And guess what? Those policies are not decided based on the best interest of the working class majority. They're being decided on what's in the best interest for the investment bankers, BlackRock, and the oligarch class. And
the
so
homeowners are part of the oligarchy, apparently, because the homeowners benefit from the policies, the current housing policies now. The regulations, the BlackRock, et cetera, it's all pushing up the price of homes, which is beneficial to homeowners. Trust me, I know, because my house increased like 10% in value since I bought it a couple of years ago. I mean, that's free money to me. It's free money because of government policies that are suppressing new houses being built. I'm for no new houses being built around me because it makes my house more expensive and more valuable, which means I can, take cash out refinances and live off that for the rest of my life if I want. So,
well,
I mean,
I just, again,
vote,
I mean,
then?
so you're trying. It's like you're assuming that a communist government is gonna take a certain policy on a home ownership issue, and it's going to. And my point to you is that's not how communism works. So communism again changes. It's not a universal approach. It looks at the changing material conditions, and then it decides on a policy based on the best interests of the working class majority. Within the context of these ever-changing material conditions. And so they might
anyone else that owns a home for.
So the material conditions at one point could be pro homeowner, and then maybe the material conditions change and their policies change to be more pro not homeowner. Like both are possible. And so it's impossible for me to speculate and tell you exactly what a working class political party is going to pursue, what kind of policy they're going to pursue in any given hypothetical situation.
Are homeowners part of the working class?
Most of them.
Homeowners?
Yeah. Well, I mean, no, I would imagine if you just own one home, I would imagine that, most of the oligarchy own multiple homes, I would assume.
Right. But the single family homeowner has a home, and if the home increases in value due to the policies, created by the oligarchy, then they're benefiting from it. So that's why they vote for the oligarchy that you're speaking of. They are benefiting from it. They're benefiting from an easier or a better standard of living. They're benefiting from increasing home prices. The devil is among us, is what I'm saying. It's not the oligarchy. It's the people who already have more than people who have less around them. And you want to drag down the homeowner and subsidize those who don't have a home and have everybody equal. And then everybody's going to be happy, and we're all going to frolic in the Simpsons cartoons and be happy.
I don't know why you make that assumption. I mean, it's nothing. I mean, it's like you're telling me what my position is, and after I just told you that's not my position. But I mean, so that's not a productive discussion there.
Do they get a vote for the party? The homeowners get a vote for a party.
No, in China, of course. Like,
no, in the United States. When the communist revolution for the United States happens, do homeowners get a vote?
I don't know why homeowners wouldn't be able to, register.
If they get a vote, they're going to vote for their homes to increase in value, which means they're going to vote for more regulations in building houses and apartments. They're going to vote for, you're going to vote for handing out more money to minorities so that they can buy homes and bid up prices on homes. They're going to strive for what you're advocating against, which is keeping the homes out of the reach of the poor people by increasing the homes in value. The problem isn't the oligarchy. The problem is that there are people who are middle class in the United States with a little bit, who want to keep their little bit from going even smaller from stupid socialist policies, taking away their rights and their money through the government.
Okay. Well, no, that's a fair perspective, and I think it's shared by a lot of people, and I appreciate you're articulating it in a discussion. I wanted to point out that home prices can also go up for other reasons unrelated to government, right? And so I'm just not sure. Again, it's just like you're assuming that a communist government is going to go against raising home prices. And I'm not sure where you
How are
get that
people
from
going to
or
get
what.
homes if they don't have homes? How are they going to get homes unless the prices go down? Where are they going to get the money to buy the homes?
Well, maybe wages go up. Maybe they enact policies that allow people to double their wages, like
Yeah,
China's done,
there's a cap
tripling their
on the
wages
amount
every
of
10 years.
value that one can provide. If you try to artificially raise wages, you're going to have inflation.
Well, how come that happened in China?
Because the wages were already
So
suppressed.
no, what you just said is a belief that you have that, again, I just disagree with. Like, you think something is true about reality, and I think China is the proof that it's not. So,
Well, the
it's
people were
possible that
already
wages go up without inflation. It's possible
China
that
has
wages go up
allowed
with
the working
inflation.
class to get more because of the state capitalism. Their wages were suppressed. The value that they were providing was being stolen in whole, if not in whole, mostly from the government and redistributed. China let off the reins a little bit and allowed them to have more of the value that they were rightfully owed from their exchanges of their labor. So that's how they increased that. In the United States, we have no cap on our abilities to improve ourselves and to go into a field that we're best at, and so our improvement are is limited. As you scale up, it gets more difficult to get higher, basically. And we were already pretty high, and there's a limit to how much value an individual can provide working, a specific job. You're not going to get paid the same. You're not going to get paid more for doing the same job for 30 years. That doesn't make any sense. If you think you can get more out of the system by doing the same job over and over and over again for years, you're delusional. You have to increase the value that you provide to others in order to get more in return.
So, I mean, I'm struck that you say that, because I mean, I just offered the idea. So you said, I'm like, you're making an assumption that a socialist party is going to implement policies that are not in the interest of those people who want their home values to increase. And I just totally reject that premise. I'm like, well, it depends. Everything depends on the context, on the situation, on what the party in power identifies as the best policy to pursue. And there's subjectivity to that. But I said, one of the ways you could increase people's home ownership without decreasing the prices of homes is to see wages increase. And then you just dismissed that, and you said, no, that'll cause inflation. And then I pointed out that, guess what? In China, again, wages have tripled every 10 years for 40 years in a row, and they don't have an inflation problem. But guess what? In this society, the one you're championing right now, we have out the door inflation. We have ridiculous inflation because we're printing money left over right to support this oligarchy and their fucked up system. It's like again, to me, what you were saying and thinking is just detached from the observable reality. And this is my criticism of your perspective. Like, it doesn't comport with what we all see. Where in China you have high home ownership, you have rising wages. In the United States, you have low home ownership, you have stagnant wages, and on top of that, you have what is that called? We just said it, inflation. So I don't know. I think if we want improvement, we can take some tips from China. We can look at China and learn some things. But it's ultimately we have to have the understanding that from the perspective of the owners, this could not be better. Like, they have everything they want. There is no improving the system. There's only making it worse from their perspective. From our perspective, there's a lot we can do to improve it. But any improvement from our perspective is gonna from their perspective not be improvement. And that's why they resist what we want to do. And that's why it's an oligarchy and not a democracy. And that's why I'm saying it's a struggle. It's a class struggle against these oligarchs.
Right. Can you explain how you think an individual is going to be making more money doing the same thing from year to year to year to year? I mean, like, what justifies the increases of wages over time? If they're doing the same job over and over again, why are they getting paid more a decade from now opposed to right now? Like, substantially above, the inflation marker. What justifies getting paid more for the same job, a year from now than right now?
You're referring to the value they provide to an owner?
to whomever they're trading their labor for compensation.
Yeah. So I mean, the owner or the state, if they're a state worker. So no, I mean, that's the capitalist system, right? And it's you're only as valuable as the labor that you have to offer an owner.
Right.
And again, this
What
directly gets us.
justifies the increase of the wage then?
Well, that's what I said. The value that you provide to the owner in that system. That's what you're saying, right?
Well, I'm saying that they get paid, X amount, and then next year or the 10 years from now, you expect them to make Y amount, which is higher than X. So what justifies the increase in wages if the value that they're providing is stagnant?
Well, I mean, my expectation is that, people that work 40 hours a week ought to be able to provide for themselves and maybe their family. This is what we had in 1970. Most single people could support a family, on one income. And I think that's a great benchmark for society. That's something we should be aspiring to. And so, I am definitely not an economist that is able to, meticulously explain, the kinds of policies that we need to get back to that kind of thing. But I understand that the oligarchy has no interest in pursuing that, right? They don't want that. That's something that the workers want. We
Right.
want.
I'll tell you
be
why.
able to-
I'll tell you why the wages don't increase over time. It's because
Okay.
there's no reason for them to increase. They're not the people who are trading compensation for the labor that they're providing don't have a reason to increase their compensation because the labor that's being provided hasn't improved. So the compensation is not going to improve. Now, if you force by fiat or by government dictate that the wages increase, despite the value being put into the economy being stagnant, what's going to happen? You're going to have inflation. And so the system, the system of economics and free trade, et cetera, is going to wash away any increases in wages. And you're going to have savers lose the value that the value of the money will go down. And anyone who has cash is going to try to put it in investments. And as we're seeing now, with inflation being out of control, recently due to the COVID pandemic and the handouts that we all got and etc.
So I'm not sure exactly what your point is. I mean, are you saying that?
I'm saying you can't fix poverty is what I'm saying, basically. You can't avoid evolution. You have to change with the times. The United States is changing. It's been changing since the 1970s. It's always changing. Every day, something is changing, and you have to change with it. That's evolution. Evolution doesn't favor the strongest or the smartest. It favors those who can change with it, with the times, I mean.
But your statement that you can't fix poverty, right? I know, and China just proves you wrong, right? Because they've lifted 800 million people out of poverty, and they've eliminated poverty as defined by the World Bank. So I don't know what planet you exist on, because in the real world, China eliminated poverty. The Communist Party of China did it. They are, it's spectacular what they've achieved.
We're in poverty because of the government. The government was stealing all of their value, and now they're giving a little bit back to them, and that looks like they're excelling. They're not excelling. They were being held back by their government. The government let up the reins a little bit and let state capitalism take over a little bit, and now they're able to get the compensation a little bit, or a part of the compensation that they were due.
I just explained to you that it was the Western trade embargo that was keeping them from trading, and yet you still blame the government of China for the trade embargo. Like, why is the government of China to blame that the West implemented a trade embargo against them? It's like you gotta kind of learn from what I'm telling you and then incorporate that into your thinking. Otherwise, it's your thinking isn't evolving. You say your thinking has to evolve. It needs to evolve. Your thinking needs to evolve.
it's since like the 90s is when they've been starting to improve their standard of living. It hasn't been since the 40s, and then they were out of their mud huts in the, you know, in the, not mud hut, I shouldn't say that, but like,
no, the embargo ended in the early 70s, and
right,
that's when the party started implementing various reforms. And yeah, the reforms continue. The reforms continue today. They're trying to do their best to, you know, put in policies that best maximize the advantage for the working class majority. But you know, I just think that, like, I mean, you're coming across like there's these, like, you understand these finite rules to political economy, and you understand that the government can't do anything, that it's just the individual that can, you know, decide if they're going to be. And I'm saying that's ridiculous. I'm saying called a political economy for a reason. There's no such thing as economy. Economy and politics are two inextricably linked concepts that, you know, affect each other. And there's a lot structurally that we have control over, that it can affect things like poverty. So the question is, what is your interest? And the allegation is from socialists that the interest of our government is not to benefit the working class, and that's why we see things have stagnated for so long. And then you talk about, you know, wages. So the thing I wanted to say about wages was, you know, owners can maximize their profits by pushing wages down. And so if you control an economic system, if you control the political economy of a society, you can do things that cause lots of unemployment, right? You can put in policies that create lots of unemployment, and that will also drive down wages. You know, when there's high unemployment, wages are going to be, supply and demand of the labor market is going to affect wages. So, you're pushing a little bit of the, the Austrian school of economics, which I think is to me, it's not related to reality, right? Because reality is very different from, you know, it's political economy. It's not economics. And you can't just ignore the political aspect. You can't ignore the oppositional class interest. You can't ignore the different interests between the owners and the workers. If you ignore that, your analysis is not going to make any sense.
The
And
homeowners and the people with human capital that allows them to make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, are they the working class too? Do they get a vote? I just like, the only way you're going to have your Marxist communist revolution in the United States is if you make everybody poor and you take away their homes. And
just like what happened in China, make everybody poor, take away their homes. They have the highest home ownership. Wages have tripled every 10 years for 40 years in a row. So I don't know. It's a total disconnect from what I see as reality. And it's,
well, how are you going to get lower home prices in the United States?
Who says I want lower home prices? Like, this is an assumption.
You want more people to have homes. How are you going to make it happen?
I just explained one possible way would be to increase. I just explained that. I mean, I get that you don't want to accept that as a possible way, but I'm just saying it happened in China. Like, wages have continually got up. Now, I think you have a valid point, David. I think you're making a valid point about levels of industrialization, levels of development. And I think as you reach, it's easy to develop when you're starting at ground zero, and then when you're one of the most advanced, you know, countries like the United States, like Western Europe, yeah, your rate of growth is going to be a lot less. Now, I get that, and that's a totally legitimate point. And I think China is still behind. China is still behind the United States, so it's easy for them to grow and develop. But I think it's obvious that what we can see from their unprecedented trajectory, from their obvious demonstrable interest in benefiting the entirety of their country and not just the wealthy elites, you know, and their embrace of the Marxist worldview. So the Marxist worldview, the one I've been arguing all this whole discussion, is their worldview. That's how they see things. And so they're thinking, within this reality of class struggle and oppositional class interests, if we are the government that represents the working class, what are the policies that we can implement to benefit the working class majority? And again, they have done that unprecedentedly successfully.
I have a question. You might be able to look it up, or maybe somebody in your chat can. Do you happen to know what the median income is for the average, or the median income is for an individual in the United States.
You want to compare that with China?
No, I just want to know what the median
No, I
income
think
is.
median income for an individual might be 70,000.
That seems a little high. You might want to look into it.
Okay, I think I'm right. So let's do it. Let's do it right now, just for fun. I'm pretty sure I'm right. So median
For the individual, not the
individual.
household.
I might be thinking household. You might be right. I might be thinking household. Let's see. Okay, I mean, I was pretty close. The median annual salary, which is often less skewed by outlying numbers, is 61,984.
Okay.
So I'm pretty close.
All right. So everyone who makes less than that, are they the people, or who's the people that's going to be in charge? Who's going to vote for the majority, the majority party in the U.S., People's Republic of the United States?
Well, if we followed, the revolutionary China model, the government would represent all people, just like China represents all people, but it's going to make sure that the wealthy billionaire oligarch class does not dictate policies, right? Does not control the government.
The policy isn't being dictated by the oligarchy. The policy is being dictated by the voter. The voter is voting for what they want. The voter wants, like I've said several times now, like more expensive houses. They want their assets to increase in value. So anyone who has less than the median is going to want, change, and anyone more than the median is going to want the same. So what's the solution? How are we going to drag down the top to below 60,000? Or how are we going to equalize things? How are we going to get homeowners? How are we going to do?
So, I mean, you're just making a lot of declarative statements that I just fundamentally disagree with. I'm not sure why you think we want to make everybody equal. I already explained at the beginning of the show that, ultimately the idea behind socialism and Marxism is to evolve past capitalism and to not having classes, right? So we don't have this
more than they have, though. So people who without homes want a home. So how are you going to make homes cheaper? People want to make more than the median. So how are you going to get them more money? You're going to have to take it from the people who have it, or drive down the asset prices. You're going to have to disenfranchise, or not disenfranchise. You're going to have to take from people who have more and give it to people who have less, right?
Well, I wouldn't be opposed. I'm not going to
wages. You're going to have to suppress the asset prices in order for people to get ahead, right? I mean, what's the solution here?
Well, it depends on what the problem is. And so, I mean, are you saying the problem is lack of home ownership? Like, what is the problem that you want the socialist a solution for?
Well, I mean, the cost of living, right? Or not the cost of living. The cost of housing has been increasing for a long time now, and people can't own homes. Rent's out of control.
Okay.
And blaming the landlords for it. But the people who own the properties aren't the oligarchy. Okay, it's the people, and they want to have their assets increase in value. So I don't see how we're going to get, more people in homes. I don't see how more people are going to get higher incomes if we're going to be having to suppress the wages and the asset values.
I'm Googling something because I'm curious. So, because I think the reality is that 1% of farms operate 70% of the world's farmland. 1% of households own roughly 40% of non-home real estate. So I think so in the U.S., the top 1% of households own roughly 40% of non-home real estate, while 100 families own over 42 million acres. Well, that 42 million acres doesn't help me. 60% of land in the U.S. is privately owned, while the top 1% owns a significant portion of value. The land ownership concentration is high, with 100 families holding millions of acres. So, no, I think land redistribution, land reform, like I'm all for that.
That'll drive down the home prices, right? Make it more affordable.
But yeah, I mean, I think, every time there's a revolution, every time somebody tries to overthrow a dictatorship or an oligarchy, that's part of the problem, right? You have landless peasants with no opportunity, and they're like, hey, we need to overthrow this government and enact some land reform. And land reform has been historically tremendously beneficial for humanity. In China, again, everybody.
Tell that to all the homeowners in the United States.
No, but the idea that so the point of the statistic, David, was to explain that the land ownership in the United States is concentrated at the very top from the very rich.
Great.
So most people, if they own a home, they own one home. Most people aren't lenders. So again, so for most people, they're not going to be adversely affected by land reform or
yes,
land.
They will. You increase the amount of homes, you're going to decrease the value of homes. Supply and demand.
Okay. So, you might be right. You might be absolutely correct that there is no escaping this dilemma that says, if we try and improve this society, some people on some issues are going to be adversely affected. And I think what you're speaking to is the unfortunate reality of reality. And I think this reality exists now, right? I think there's a lot of people adversely affected by policies of the current government, right? And I'm saying improvement involves putting in a government that wants to identify and further the interests of the majority, working class majority, instead of the, oligarch minority. So what?
The renters.
No. Okay. So because I think that there might be a lot of homeowners that they own one home and they own that home, and they're happy if that home isn't particularly expensive because they have to pay less taxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
No.
I mean, I'm sure like people who don't work are very concerned about their taxes going up because their fixed income is a stipend from the government. But those who have a job, who are working, who have an income, they want the value of their home to increase because it means more money available to them in equity. So, I mean, if you're going to take away the land from the 1% or whatever and build thousands or millions of homes on it, you're going to drive down the value of the homes that individuals own across the country, and they're not going to vote for that, so you're not going to get it unless you have some sort of dictatorship.
No, it's fine to point out what you're pointing out and to make those extrapolations from what you're saying. I'm not an expert on, it sounds like you're involved in real estate. You're very hyper fixated on this real estate issue, and that's what you know. And
well, it's capital that an individual owns.
I understand that. And so again,
socialists like to avoid the concept of an individual having capital in the form of human capital, or in the form of a home, or maybe a small business, or an sole proprietorship, and you'd have to get rid of all of that in order to have the communist revolution or utopia.
But David, again, what you just said, just is entirely contradicted with everything I've said and with the reality, right? Because again, we can look at China and we could see that that's not true, that China has a higher home ownership rate, that China has skyrocketing wages, and they have a very stable economy. They don't have the debt. They don't have the inflation. And then the other thing is, I think right now there's more empty homes than there are homeless, right? And so you talk about the necessity of building all these homes after your land reform. And again, you're making these assumptions, which, you're forcing me to contend with, but it sounds like bullshit, David. It sounds like fucking bullshit. If there's more homeless people, if there's more empty homes than homeless people, why do we have to build tons and tons of homes? It's like you're stating these things as if they're fact, and you're making me, deal with your arguments. but it does sound like bullshit. It doesn't sound persuasive to me that
you can't afford the homes.
Okay. So here's the thing. Okay. So for instance, let's talk about you're a government and you have to decide upon a policy, right? And 50% of the population, due to arbitrary reason, is going to be adversely affected, whereas the other 50% is going to be benefited. So what do you do as a government if you're, it's tough. And so this is the reality of reality. Like sometimes you have to make tough choices and there's no real good option. So how do you handle that? I mean, you could say, well, okay, this time 50% of people who are being adversely affected, you're going to get the short end of the stick. But guess what? We're going to change policies and flip it around to make it fair next time. Like, again, when you're in leadership, when you're deciding policy, you're going to encounter these situations where there's just no good option and you have to pick, the least bad. And sometimes it's not even clear which is good and which is bad. You just have to pick something. Right. So I get that. I don't think that is an argument against socialism. That has nothing to do with anything I'm saying. That's just the reality that a socialist government is going to have to deal with, just like the capitalist government is having to deal with. And the difference is the capitalist government is only interested in identifying and pursuing the interests of the capitalist class, of the wealthy elites, of the oligarchy.
You got to include the homeowners in there and the people with human capital who are making their own money off of their own. Look, those are the oligarchies you have to include.
Here's why I don't have to include them, because I'm not thinking solely about real estate, David. I'm thinking about foreign policy. I'm thinking about nuclear war. I'm thinking about 100 regime changes since 1945. I'm thinking of foreign policy. I'm thinking of other domestic policy. I'm thinking of healthcare. So, motherfucker,
care more about how much their home is worth than they do about the foreign policy in Israel. I mean, you're not going to have people vote for your party if it means their home is going to be halved in value if they have the proper foreign policy. I mean, come on, man.
Well, I mean, that's why we call it a dictatorship of the proletariat. And that's why the dictatorship of the proletariat is better than the dictatorship of the oligarchy.
People are allowed to enter the oligarchy, become homeowners, develop their human capital all on their own if they want to. I mean, absent some disability, you, communist socialist who's watching right now, you can own your own home. I promise. Just contact me, DM me. I'll give you some advice, and we'll get you a home probably like within a year. We could get you a home. Even if you're working at McDonald's, I'm sure we could find you a fixer-upper. And no, I'm not real estate.
So, yeah, I mean, but again, to me, there's so many other more important things. Like I would happily, my home is it's more than doubled in value since I bought it in 2008. So
that's great.
Yeah, no, it is. It's really allowed a certain lifestyle. I'm still in debt. I'm like $1 million in debt. Like I have $1 million in debt right now. But, it's like I would happily exchange that if I had a government that represented me, if I had a government that wasn't going around the planet murdering women and children. Like I would trade that in a heartbeat. Now, maybe I get it. A lot of people wouldn't, and a lot of people don't. But again, I'm thinking that aspect of humanity where capitalism tries to, entice people into being pieces of shit. I think that is definitely malleable. And I think, in a rational society where we have a government genuinely concerned about the well-being of the working class majority, you're not going to have a media constantly trying to indoctrinate people into, selfish, psychopathic, advocacy. So,
if I were you, I would be hoping that, for a recession or a depression, more and more poor people, because the only way you're going to get this across to people is if everybody is poor. If everyone doesn't own their own, if there are more renters than there are homeowners, if there are more people below that median than there are above it, that's the only way it's going to happen, man. Because the oligarchy are among us. Okay, you're part of the
Well,
oligarchy. You have a home. You own a home.
no,
You have to
so
use capital. You're
again,
very
we
good at
have a
speaking it.
fundamental different perception about what comprises the oligarchy. Like, I don't have any
Yeah,
influence over the
yeah.
government. Just because you own a home doesn't mean you have any influence over the government. Now,
You
certainly,
vote.
as imperial citizens, the imperial government has a need for its own self-preservation to placate the citizenry. That's absolutely true. And so, one of the ways that they have placated the citizenry and made, allowed me to go $1 million in debt, thank you, is because they don't want us revolutionary. But guess what? They are mismanaging their system, and their oligarchy is unsustainable, and the system is unsustainable. And what I've been able to accumulate, they're not offering to the rest of humanity. And so what they've offered me is at the direct expense of, millions and millions of people, millions of dead people, and then tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people who have been impoverished and immiserated. Are you shaking your head at that? You
Yeah,
disagree with that?
yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, so
Money isn't a finite resource.
I didn't say money was a finite resource. I said the United States government has gone around the planet making people more poor by overthrowing governments, starting wars, napalming forests. I mean, that's just what they've done. And so,
How does that
and
translate to you getting $1 million?
what?
I mean, I don't understand how that translates to uh, us over here. You keep pointing to China. You keep pointing to the rest of the world. Well, we should probably stick with where we are.
Well, no, I mean, the reality is that everything is interconnected and everything relates to everything else in certain ways. And so anybody who's sensible, anybody who's thoughtful is going to identify concepts and how they relate to other concepts. And you got to understand that the government in the United States is a global empire. It has 1,000 military bases in the majority of countries around the world. We've been at perpetual war. We engage in multiple genocides. We are extracting and exploiting resources all around the world, not really to benefit me and you, but to benefit the owners of society, the ownership class, the oligarchy. And so, with that in mind, it's like, we could improve upon that. That is not necessary, right? I don't think that my $1 million in debt is because of this, global empire that is at perpetual war and just murdering people every day. And so again, I think we can improve upon that, and I think we could all have a good standard of living, even a better standard of living than we currently do, if we had a rational leadership and a rational government that wasn't interested in only benefiting, their small, tiny minority of psychopathic millionaires.
It benefits the people with capital.
Right. But if you look at how capital is accumulated in this country, it's like the 1%. Look, David, the 0.1% account for more capital than the poorest 90%. Did you hear what I said?
Yeah, I did.
I mean, so no, because it's important to appreciate it. Like, I don't think most people understand that all of the capital is in very, very few hands. Now, it's not all of the capital, it's just most of the capital. So the richest 0.1% have more capital than the poorest 90%, which means that they use that capital to what? To buy the government, to buy the policies, to buy your opinions through their media.
When you say capital, do you mean what do you mean by capital?
Well, what I mean by capital is currency, like capital, like
money.
Money.
All right. So money isn't a finite resource. You make money when you provide value to people. Okay. You can't put all the money in a safe and then nobody has any money. Okay. You make money when you do something that somebody else wants done. When you make someone else happier. When you make their lives better.
So, I mean, no, that's not the only way. I mean, you can steal people's shit, right? And
right,
so
the government.
No, and that's what I'm saying. So our government goes around the planet stealing people's shit, making people poorer and more worse off. right? That's what our government does. And I'm saying we can improve upon that, David.
Yeah, they also steal from, the people who pay taxes in this country, and then they use it to buy votes from poor people. I do you want to stop that too? I just
Well, I want to improve things, and I recognize that there's an impediment to improvement. I'm realizing that that impediment to improvement is a class of people who have managed to put themselves as the owners of our government and our industries and our political system and our economic system. Like there's owners to that system, and they're the ones that are
the
going
people with
around.
the capital. It's the people.
What?
It's the people with the capital.
Okay.
You say
And they're going
oligarchy,
around-
you're like referring to millionaires and billionaires, but everybody who has capital is your enemy. Probably you too. I mean, you own a home too. You're part of the oligarchy. You have capital. You're
But
utilizing your human
I'm
capital
not
to make
involved
money
in
every day. You have-
influencing the government that is owned by the oligarchs. So I don't know. There's a huge distinction. I think maybe viewers are understanding what you're trying to say. Like I'm not getting it. It doesn't make any sense to me. But I mean, let me just clarify what. So I think probably at least 90% of us, the poorest 90% with income, I would consider the working class, and maybe even up to the 99th percentile. Like anybody that has to work for a living to survive, even if they have a high standard of living, even if they have 2 homes, like I'm going to consider them, the working class. It's like unless you're rich enough to afford a political party or to buy a politician, unless you can afford an actual, media company, a media conglomerate where you can, brainwash people on a mass basis. Like, unless you're that rich, you're not part of the oligarchy. You're not part of the ruling class. The ruling class is the ones that own the government, and they determine, the policies, and they determine the narratives that they're going to indoctrinate everybody with. So 99% of the people in this country are not part of that class, David. And so it's just weird that you keep on insisting that as a homeowner, I'm part of that class. Like it's just, it's frustrating because no, that's not what I'm saying.
Anyone with capital is part of that class.
Okay. It's tough. I look, it's 2:11 and I've been doing this since 9:30 and my brain is getting towards the end, but I don't know. I think the chat probably is being more, having better responses to what you're trying to say than I'm able to do right now. I think I'm experiencing some definite cognitive limitations. I did enjoy this, and I'm hoping that other people are going to be willing to engage with you, David, engage with me, because I think we both have a hard time getting people to engage with us.
Right. Also, I mean, on a personal note, I mean, I'm not a financial advisor anyway, either, but I'm personally curious about the debt, and I want to help out. So if you ever think about wanting to like restructure, and if you have interest rate problems, or depending on what the debt is in, there are probably options available to lower the interest rates. Hopefully.
No, I got very low interest rate. I got a low interest rate. I haven't had. I mean, they're way higher than I have right now. But it's mostly my home. I mean, it's and then my pool. so yeah.
A bourgeois.
Yeah. No, again, I wish, David, if everybody could have the lifestyle I have, I would be the biggest proponent of this system. But I know that's not true, David. I know
because evolution is real, and you're one of the ones that know.
Dude, I am so lucky. I am lucky. Like, it's not anything that I've earned, David. I didn't earn it. I promise.
Was it given to you by your parents, or do you have a job? Or
my parents helped me a lot. I was given some loans by my parents. That's very fortunate. David, just even having 2 parents that love each other. Like, how lucky are you to have that? Like, I had that. So I mean, right there, like I am fucking doing really good, and it's unearned privilege, dude. It's unearned privilege.
It's anyway,
evolution. Okay. So yeah, I'm hoping we can, continue the discussion. I want more of these kinds of things within our debate group. More people Because I'll bet you a lot of people have stuff to say to you, and there's probably a lot of people in your chat that want to challenge me. And so I'm open for that, and I think that would be great, and I think it would be good. And I think we, need to maintain civility and an appreciation for each other, and an appreciation for each other, able to articulate their different views and discuss these differences. I mean, it's super important, especially, because we're just getting in this really crazy time in our country, crazy time domestically.
Right. All right. Well, I am definitely down for any conversations with you in the future, or anyone who spotted something that I said that wants to pick at it and maybe make me bleed.
Okay. On that note, thanks, David, and I will retire for a big long rest.
Great. Have a good night or a good day, and I hope you do well.
David, we'll talk again. I'll keep in touch by instant message here on Facebook.
Okay. I'll talk to you later.
Bye. All right.
Bye.